Hello and welcome. Today, we're very pleased to host a virtual conference devoted to raising capital in FemTech. And we're going to speak about opportunities and challenges in this emerging industry. My name is Kate Butts. I'm the managing partner of Deep Knowledge Group and the director of FemTech Analytics. FemTech Analytics is part of Deep Knowledge Group. We're relatively young, unlike Deep Knowledge Group, which has been in operation since 2013. Our focus is analytics in FemTech industry. Deep Knowledge Group encompasses several branches. It's a consortium of commercial and nonprofit organizations, and we focus both on investing as well as analytical subsidiaries, and we also participate in a number of nonprofit initiatives. The game plan for today is to have two panels hosted by our moderators. During the first panel, we're going to speak about raising capital in FemTech, and the second panel will focus on accelerating growth in FemTech. Each speaker will have about 10 minutes to present their talk, and each panel in the end will be followed by a Q&A session. We'll have 3 hours, and we also welcome all of our live audience to post their questions in Q&A session. This webinar is being recorded, and we're going to distribute the link to those who subscribed later on. I'm delighted to welcome two of our moderators. The first one is Jo Living. Jo is a co-founder and CEO at Fertility Cycle. Her background is investment banking at UBS and JP Morgan. Jo transitioned into the world of social enterprise and startups, and we're very happy to see that. And in this year, Jo's company actually raised £600,000 in pre-seed funding. Our second moderator is Dr. Ksenia Tugay, who is a strategic innovation expert at Group Mutual, which is a Swiss health insurance company. Ksenia is also a lead for Tech Forever FemTech Startup Acceleration Program. Ksenia will tell more, but on December 7th, the Accelerated program actually has a closing ceremony, which we welcome everyone to attend. So thank you, everyone, for joining. And now I would love to give the floor to Jo.
Thank you so much, Kate, and thank you for having me. Hi, yes, everyone. I am co-founder and COO of Fertility Circle, as Kate mentioned. We launched just last year an app to support anyone trying to conceive with access to fertility experts, education, events, and emotional support. And through a proof of concept basic app, we were able to raise £600,000 in pre-seed funding through a combination of crowdfunding, angel investors, and onboarded a VC as well. So I know a little bit about the startup ecosystem and have a little bit of fundraising experience, still learning a huge amount as I go. And it's so important to have events like this to share the knowledge and make sure that we're breaking down barriers for female entrepreneurs to access that investment, which can bring game-changing innovations to the forefront. And I'm delighted to be joined today by some excellent panelists that I look forward to introducing. As mentioned, they're going to speak for about 3 people will speak for about 10 minutes each, and we have a panel of 5 later on where we'll have hopefully quite a lively discussion about the challenges and obstacles and opportunities in FemTech. I feel very passionately that FemTech is not a niche, it's every other person on the planet, and as women, as female founders, and as a sector, we need to support those coming up and starting out to really help a fledgling industry to grow, which has so much potential for important innovations. And I'm really excited about the potential of female investors in stepping into their power with their and taking autonomy over their wealth as wealth holders to direct funds to the kind of causes and innovations they care about. So lots on the agenda today. I don't want to take up too much more time with me. You can add me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect and answer questions at the end of today's session or later on if people want to reach out. Otherwise, more importantly, we have some excellent speakers joining us today. So the first is Tal Katran. Tal is a prominent figure in the global innovation ecosystem, and he's actually founded 17 startup accelerators since 2012. in both Israel and abroad and taking them globally. It's rather positioned him as a guru on accelerators, hubs, and startup ecosystems. So over the years, Tal has run over 60 cohorts with nearly 1,000 startups coming through his accelerators. He serves as an advisory board member in a variety of companies and tech startups. So he really knows his stuff, and he's actively involved in promoting and mentoring various ecosystems across the globe. He's a keynote speaker in TEDx and on startups, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So we're very lucky to be joined by him today. And Tal, if I can ask you to unmute and turn on your video, we'll be hearing from you for about 10 minutes on some advice and anything you can share for our audience today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe, for having me here. So excited to be here. Definitely excited to see the counter of participants running up. This is not something that you see too often, and I think more than that is to see the welcoming. Oh my God, like everyone is kind of welcoming and telling you're here, and this is purely amazing. I hope to see that on all the conferences I'm participating, and I do kind of challenge you not just to say hello, but also introduce yourself and use this chat not just to ask questions, but also to present yourself and share ideas what you can take and bring. So I'm here to talk about fundraising for FemTech. Well, I know a few things about FemTech. As me and my co-founder, we established in 2018 Eve FemTech Hub, the one hub in Israel doing FemTech. Honestly, when she reached out to me and she said FemTech, I was like, FinTech? She said, no, FemTech. I did not have a clue what FemTech was. Like women's digital health, I didn't know the first clue about it. I can tell you after near 3 years now that I know gynecologist myself, and I see the challenges. Again, I'm very proud to say that half of the startups I saw were led by women, but the other half was led by men. So this is that FemTech is not women empowerment. FemTech is women's digital health. And I do hope we have some men in the audience here as well. Now, aside from that, I'm here to speak about fundraising. That's the hot potato. So if you ask any startup what's so difficult for you to do, probably you will hear two things. One is to find my second half, let's say, the technical person I need to bring on board. That's usually the problem. People have tons of ideas, but less people are kind of savvy on the technology. I'm talking about the innovators. And then the second part will be fundraising. Now, you would assume that since women count for more than half of the population on Earth, and they have what they have in way of what they need, you would kind of assume that they will be also the best innovators for what they need, because, I mean, it makes sense that if you're so familiar with the problem, you would be the best to come with the solution. Well, I don't know to say much about it. As I said, I saw half and half, but that is really not the criteria for me to kind of judge if it's good or not. I'm here to speak, as I said, about fun and why it's difficult, by the way, in general. It's not just difficult for FemTech. It's generally difficult to raise funds, because if you think about it, it would be mostly, when do I start funding? I mean, when do I start to raise funds? Usually, if you ask me, people start too early. They start before validating their idea. Like, you're not kind of 100% baked and sure about your idea, and you already expect someone to pay for your idea. Well, if turn the tables, probably you will not be doing the same. You will ask a simple question: did you validate? And if the answer was, well, I'm in the process, you will say, great. You seem to be like a great team and a great person, and I'm really impressed. Have some more meat on the stick and then come back. Go and validate and then kind of call me. So about fundraising, I just want to kind of change a little bit, if I can, this perception that when you wake up any startup in the middle of the night, you ask you, what do you need? Money. I need to raise funds. Did you ever stop and ask, why do you need to raise funds? I mean, are you going to buy your next Tesla X? Are you going to take a dividend? Of course not. taking a salary is something that you don't think about as a startup. So why would you need the money? And the answer would be to do R&D, or in more simple words, I need to pay salary to someone. Well, let me tell you also as an angel investor, my expectation would be that if you're so great on the idea, you will have some additional powers to magnet to you the people that you need, that the people you need to get help. I mean, you need people to help you magnet them with your ability. Otherwise, you know what? With money, I can do everything. I can do great marketing. I can do an amazing presentation. I can do, I don't know, amazing video, and I can develop technology with the money. But the issue is your startups. The one thing that you don't have is money. You have brain capacity. You have charisma. You have passion. You have so many things that need to work for you in order to attract and connect. So if you just indulge this thought that maybe the fact that people tell you you must raise money is not a must, and you can go a different way in finding people that would become your partners, maybe you don't need to raise funds. But let's say that you do need, and we can still need to discuss this FemTech raising money. And what we will probably see is that FemTech startups are kind of, I don't know, 2% maybe of the entire money that you will raise as the entire companies in health, in health, digital health. FemTech counts for maybe 2%, maybe 3%, almost a nothing. How is it? How is it that this amount of companies that have raised money, I think 500, 600 million, kind of in the neighborhood of last year, from the total of, I think, over 60 or near $70 billion that the entire digital health community raised. It's almost nothing. How is it? I think we cannot kind of hide from the fact that, well, when you look at the market of investors, probably you will be meeting men. You meet me. What do I know about FemTech? Okay, I know about FemTech, but how much can I relate to the problem of, I don't know, menstrual, urine, pregnancy? What do I know? I never felt it. I don't know how it feels. Now you come to convince me and say, this is what the world needs. I think, for one, try and take it to where I can relate to things I can feel maybe in the way that I live my life, just as an example, because I cannot live a woman's life. You need to bring it to the common denominator, which is my life, number one. Number two, like speaking in kind of men terms. Again, you can avoid it when you talk to male investors. This is how it is. Second, I think that the most kind of question I hear is, how is it that in general, startups led by women count for less than 10% of the entire startup ecosystem in the world generally? Why? I think that it has something to do with women in general kind of being more shy of taking risks. They want it kind of more secured, and startups are all about risk because, I don't know, 96, 97, 94, who cares? Number of startups will kind of shut down first year of operation anyway. So you're gonna entering the most riskiest job on earth. Go to a lion's den is more secure than having a startup. But when you're,
there's also a big part about the ecosystem, isn't there, and how it's sort of the structural kind of limitations that mean some of the decision making is led by, you know, white male urban-based professionals, and so, like you said, then the money flows to things they understand and care about, which oftentimes is the innovations from other white male urban-based professionals. And we see a plethora of dry cleaning apps and food delivery apps and taxi services as people outsource their mother, quite frankly. So there's the both sides, isn't there? There's probably women maybe aren't as risk-taking, but I think there's a whole lot of work which we'll explore in the panel, I'm sure, around the ecosystem. Would you agree with that?
Was that my cue to stop? So I agree with everything that you said, and that's it.
Yeah, no. I mean, I was interested in your response, but that's certainly something we'll be diving into later, because I think it's very easy to say that women aren't risk takers, and probably that is true as a generalization. But I think it goes so much deeper than that in the structural kind of obstacles that females face, and whether it is pitching to male investors. Should we always be having to moderate our pitch, and can we not meet halfway with men, like really trying to understand the innovation rather than having to kind of dumb it down or translate it? And so there's a meeting of minds that has to be some middle ground there, and that's certainly been my experience in pitching fertility to male investors.
So I would agree with you if I would to see as an investor any startup led by a woman pitching to me. I relate to what you're saying, but when we touch the issue of FemTech, men just don't get it, and you do need to alter. Don't just say, you know what, that's my truth, I want it. Good, go ahead. You will not raise money. Probably you will not. So, flow. In the end, what matters is the end result. Startups are about delivery, about the bottom line of things. And what you want to get, if you want to get the money, it's get the money. But get
Absolutely.
the money in a way. Get the money in a way that if you have good technology, it probably with a good team, it will work for you anyways. I see the startup that raise money, including the FemTech. The good one raise money, no doubt about it, regardless if it's a man or whatever. What I do see, to my surprise, is I would look at women investors as more open to the issue, and this is not what I'm seeing. I'm not seeing women investors saying, oh, you know, I understand in the subject, I will take it. No, they will tell, same as men, listen, we invest in good startups. I don't care what they do inside.
I mean, inevitably, I think you have to translate it, and there's a piece of education in the pitch, isn't there, to bring people on the journey with you to understand the problem and your solution. So there's got to be a meeting in the middle there. But I do also think there is that unconscious bias, and sometimes more conscious, or just not understanding the issue. So it has to be in terms that the investor can understand, but it also needs to be true to the founder's integrity, I think. So an issue I really look forward to exploring a bit later on. So thank you so much, Cal. I think we're going to move on to Catherine Gilroy now. Catherine is a senior associate at Seedrs, a leading private investment platform and the most active funder of private companies in the UK, more commonly known as crowdfunding. Catherine sources businesses for the Seedrs investor audience. She advises entrepreneurs on how to strategize around their investment rounds and to raise capital, market their business, and build a community of brand ambassadors. As diversity lead, she also advocates for underrepresented founders and works to ensure the platform supports as many founders from underrepresented backgrounds as possible, which is super important. To date, she's helped over 40 seed stage businesses to raise over £17.5 million. So Catherine, if you would be kind enough to unmute and turn on your video, and we'd love to hear from you for about 10 minutes or so. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks, and thanks everyone for having me here today. As Joe just said, my name is Catherine. I'm a senior associate at Seedrs, and today I'm going to be talking about the power of the crowd. And I'm going to basically walk you through who Seedrs are, what we do, and why that's particularly relevant for FemTech businesses. And I'm hopefully be able to bring that to life a little bit for you as well. For those who might not be so familiar with Seedrs, we are a marketplace for investing in high growth startups and scale-ups. We work with some of the businesses that you will have heard of, like Revolut, as well as those that some that you may not have heard of yet. We can work with almost any kind of business in the UK and the EU, but we really love working with mission-led businesses that are scaling at pace, and crucially that have a brilliant story to tell. And the aim with a crowdfunding campaign, if you've not come across it before, is typically to raise as much money as possible from as many people as possible. We've actually worked with a number of FemTech businesses to date, which is great. We've got a couple that are currently live on the platform at the moment. Do go check them out. Remember that capital is at risk if you go and take a look at them. But just for some context, so Seedrs was created with the aim of democratizing private investment. So prior to platforms like ours, the investment world was, and in some cases still is, pretty opaque. And it was all about who you know, not necessarily what you know. And so if you were a startup looking to raise investment, it was pretty impossible to do that unless you operated in certain circles or you were from a certain demographic. And then on the flip side of that, if you were if you were an investor or you were looking to invest in early stage startups, again, you couldn't get access to those deals unless you were in those circles. So what we typically had was usually men of a certain demographic investing in other men from the same demographic, which was a problem for anyone that didn't fit into that group. And so the platform was created with the aim of bringing down some of these barriers, and opening up this asset class was really important for the startup ecosystem generally, but particularly for founders who were running businesses like FemTech businesses. And that's because, as we've touched on a little bit already, investors typically invest in what they know and what they understand, and in things that they can resonate with, things that they've experienced themselves. And I'm sure we're going to hear that today as a common theme when it comes to some of the challenges that FemTech businesses face. But that's why we were created. And as you can see, it's going pretty well so far. We've had over 1.5 billion invested into campaigns so far, and we've worked with businesses from 21 different European countries, which is brilliant. And that success has resulted in this number. We actually think it's slightly higher than this now. This is a statistic that was produced back in 2019, I think. But 1 in 3 seed stage companies choose crowdfunding as a way to raise investment. We actually work with businesses from seed all the way through to kind of Series C, Series D. But the reason that this statistic is relevant for today's topic is because the FemTech industry has only really started to gain traction in the past couple of years. Meaning that lots of the businesses that are in this space that are thinking about raising money to help them to start scaling are typically at that seed stage. And so I guess the point with this is that if you are a FemTech business and you're thinking about raising funds, crowdfunding should at least be on your radar, because it's a really popular way of raising money for businesses at that early stage. And this is typically why businesses will use crowdfunding, again, for anyone who hasn't considered this as a route before. And I'll walk you through these really quickly. So the first one is the money. That's hopefully relatively obvious. As I just said before, it's a way of accessing capital that you might not otherwise have access to. And in my role, what I think one of the most common things that entrepreneurs say to me is that they don't know any investors. And I'm constantly saying to people that at least when it comes to crowdfunding, you need to unthink anything that you think you know about who an investor is. Because with a crowdfunding platform, you're looking at minimum investment levels of £10 or €10. So actually anybody who knows and loves your brand, or you and the rest of the founding team, and wants to support you and has at least £10 in it to be able to do that, can be an investor in your business. You obviously need an awful lot of £10 investors in order to get to your fundraising target, but it's really important that you can access absolutely any kind of investor. The next one is validation. If you run a crowdfunding campaign and you get hundreds, or in some cases thousands, of individual people who have voted with their wallet to back and support your business, then what better validation of what you're trying to do is there than that, particularly if you are at that seed stage, if you're at that early stage in your business's journey. The next piece of the puzzle is community engagement. This is a really important part of crowdfunding. If you're able to take your users, your customers, your social media followers, the people you've got on your waiting list, the people who are really interested in what you're building, and give them the opportunity to actually be part of the journey with you, by owning a piece of your business, however big or however small, then you'll get a ton of value out of those people. They will typically buy from you more, they'll use you more, they'll become much stickier customers, and they'll hopefully also recommend you, they'll talk about you, and they'll become real brand advocates for the business, because ultimately they have the chance to share in your success. So it's really about cementing their loyalty to your brand. On the flip side of that, crowdfunding is a marketing exercise in itself. So as well as engaging the people who already know about what you're doing, it's a really brilliant platform to put your business in front of hundreds of thousands of new people who might never have heard of you before, so that you can tell your story, you can do that education piece, and you can really get the message out there. And hopefully a lot of those people will invest in your business, but also become customers, brand advocates, recommenders, and so on. And so you essentially engage your community and then build it out through a crowdfunding campaign. And then the last reason is speed. You can typically run a crowdfunding campaign in 3 to 4 months, versus other traditional routes of funding, which take a little bit longer. What does this mean for for FemTech. What I thought I'd run you through is what makes a business suitable for the crowd, and hopefully you'll see why I think this makes it particularly relevant for FemTech businesses. This is kind of what I look for when I'm considering startups that I think might want to raise for us. So I'm looking for impact-driven businesses. We want startups that are mission-led. Our investors are investing with both their head and their heart. You know, they hopefully want to make a return on their money, but they also want to feel good about where they're putting their money. And I haven't come across a single FemTech business so far that isn't impact driven. The second one is we predominantly work with consumer brands. Crowdfunding works best for B2C brands because you have a customer base that you can engage, but as I just mentioned, also any new investors can also be customers and brand advocates. So it's a good customer acquisition piece in itself. We also want business propositions that your average everyday person can understand. If our retail investors can relate to your proposition and could see themselves or someone they know as customers, then they're more likely to invest. We want businesses with community at the core, so businesses who can get value out of the crowd. Lots of FemTech businesses actually have community built into their businesses because they are tackling really sensitive issues, and so they part of their offering is quite often it's support and it's that community element. So what a brilliant way to then use that community and really solidify it. The next thing is we're looking for emerging sectors. All startup investors want to invest in the next big thing. The FemTech industry has been around for a little while now, but as I said before, it's just in the past couple of years that it's really started gaining traction and momentum. And then the last thing is we're looking for rapidly growing markets. If investors know that they're getting into a space early, but it's a space that's really taking off, and then that makes it super exciting. I found this, you see this kind of various different numbers that are thrown around in terms of the size of the potential opportunity or the potential market of the FemTech industry. This is the biggest one I think that I found that was put together by FemTech Focus. $1.186 trillion is the estimated global value of the FemTech industry. That's enormous, and that makes it really, really exciting for investors. And so I wanted to talk you through a little bit about why crowdfunding is different to some of the other routes to investment out there, and why it should be relevant for FemTech businesses. And the first one is that you have an opportunity to speak to a more gender diverse investor base. As you can see here, we've got about 1/3 of our investor audience is female, which is not where we would like it to be, but it's going in the right direction. And actually, if you look at that versus other traditional investing options, you know, there are reports out there that say that only about 13% of VC partners are female, only about 14% of angel investors. I think both of those numbers are also going up, but it's a pretty low bar to start with. So if you can talk to an audience that is likely to understand and resonate with your proposition more than other investors might do, then that can be a really interesting option for you. The next thing is that it's a really accessible way of investing. I mentioned before that investors can invest from as little as £10. And effectively what you're doing then is widening the pool of investors who can invest in your business. And that includes being able to engage the entrepreneur's own personal and professional network. So people who want to support those founders who understand that the journey that they're on. And it's a way to then be able to pull more people and get more diversity on your cap table. And the last thing is that it's a way to access support that perhaps isn't available with some other investors. We, for example, as a platform, have signed up to the Investing in Women Code. That means that we're actively baking it into our business strategy to ensure that we increase diversity in our portfolio. We do that through support that we offer, and we do it through partnerships. And it's it's just a way to make sure that we're putting the money in the right places. And so hopefully you're now thinking about raising through crowdfunding. If you are, and if you only take one thing away from my presentation, it's this slide. This is kind of very basic equation as to how to run a crowdfunding campaign, and the strategy within this will be different from business to business. But effectively, a crowdfunding campaign is made up of your private network. So that can be friends, family, professional contacts. It can be angel investors, VCs, funds, family offices, basically your first level of investors who are going to come in and anchor your round. The second phase is your business community. This is your customers, your users, your social medias, people who are already following the brand. And then the third pot of investment are the platform investors. And I wanted to just kind of walk you through a really quick case study to bring this to life a little bit. This is a business that I worked with last year. It's a business called Sisters, which is a FemTech that currently focuses on menstrual health, but I know they have ambitions to do much more. They raised funds with us in November last year to start scaling their business to the next level. They raised 663,000 from just over 400 investors, had a really, really successful round with us. The aim for their campaign was obviously to raise the capital that they needed, but also they wanted to engage their existing community and then build out their tribe as well. And here's essentially how they did it. With their anchor investments, that first piece of the puzzle that I just mentioned, their existing investors and then some key angels came in to anchor that round. Then looking at their community, we did a couple of things to essentially engage them and bring them in and make this as accessible as possible. So they had quite an engaged audience across their social media, for example. So we ran an Instagram live with them to essentially educate their audience about crowdfunding and helped their customers to realize that this was actually open to them, so that their customers weren't counting themselves out, helping people to understand what investment was, what it meant, and how they could get involved, and also what the risks were. They baked in some interesting investor perks into their campaign, so that depending on what level you invested, Sisters would donate some products to charity on your behalf. You would access discounts or potentially free products. And they gave early access to new product development as a way to reward their community who were already following them, as an additional little perk on top of their investment. And then it then came to the Seeders audience. And what we ran here was a sustainability focused messaging. They used their campaign almost as an education piece. There were a lot of penny drop moments throughout their campaign with investors who were saying, we had no idea what was in the period products that we were using before until we watched your campaign video, and we understood that there were chemicals and other things in there that we hadn't even thought about. And so it was a really, really brilliant way for them to get their story out and to push that out. We did some kind of product reviews within the teams that we shouted out across social media. And then we ran webinars with them, and also did them jointly with other female focused communities that we had partnerships with. And the reason we did that was to get the business in front of more people that we knew the proposition would resonate with. And as you can see, it was super successful and it worked really, really well. And so that's my whistle stop tour of crowdfunding for FemTech businesses. If you're a FemTech and you're thinking about raising funds, essentially, if you've got a community to engage and you want to access a more diverse investor base, then crowdfunding is at the very least something that you should be thinking about.
Thank you so much. Is there any organisations or startups for which you would think this wasn't a suitable route, or is it pretty much universally accessible and advisable?
I think if you're at a very, very early stage of your business, it's potentially not the right route unless you have a really good personal network that you effectively want to pull together and syndicate through the platform. Likewise, if you're a B2B business, sometimes they can struggle with crowdfunding because they tend to have less of a community. And I guess you don't get that thing where new investors say, oh, I could see myself using this product, or somebody I know could see myself using this product. And then I guess also on that side of things, if your business proposition is very complex. So for example, if you have a deep tech proposition, for example, again, if you think of your average everyday person on the street, if they wouldn't necessarily understand what you're doing very quickly, then it might not connect with some of the retail investors on the platform.
That was really clear and helpful, and actually a lot of it resonated with my own fundraising journey. Our earliest backers were high profile women in the business community, and we're starting to think about our seed round and a sort of more B2B pivot. So lots of good advice there, which certainly resonates with me. So thank you so much for your time. But we're going to invite now all the panelists to turn on their cameras and unmute, and joined by two more people. First of all, Elena Gandvarg is the principal at Flint Capital, an international venture capital fund investing in technology-driven companies. And Elena is a VC investor with over 15 years of experience in enterprise software, telecoms, digital health, SaaS, VC, and management consulting spanning US, Europe, and Israel. So really experienced. Thank you for joining, Elena. And we also have Olivia Kramer from The Craftery, which is a British venture capital firm. Olivia sits on The Craftery's deal team and does everything from helping brands to partner, as well as analysing sectors that maybe The Craftery is interested to explore, and executing deals once those brands have been identified, and supporting them on their journey pertaining to finance and investment raising. So really good panel. Thank you all for joining us. Hello, Olivia, and hello, Elena. Maybe just
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Hi, Joan. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to start just by saying it's an often quoted stat that only 2.3% of VC money goes to female founders. We had started to dip in a bit of a debate with Tal. Was that structural systemic barriers, or is it something about women not taking the risks and identifying as founders? What are the, I personally believe there's some sort of structural obstacles in there. What do you believe there are, and how can they be overcome? And whoever would like to comment on that. Maybe Elena.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, it's there's not one answer to this, because it's what I see personally. I look at startups from the morning till the evening. You know, that's what I do, and generally there are fewer female founders that come to me to pitch. So why is that? You know, it's generally there are less females that start their own startups. I think it's a known fact, right? For various reasons. Another problem, of course, that was already mentioned today previously, is that we know about a lot of problems and challenges that are totally not familiar to male partners, and I think that females have to do a better job in trying to explain the problem. You know, like I always suggest, when you pitch as investors, start with a problem statement and try to explain it the way that people who are not familiar with this industry at all, or with this problem, can understand. Don't expect male partners to relate to what you're building, you know, and I have the same expectation from the startups, from the founders who come to me and pitch about their products in cybersecurity, you know, the areas that I'm not familiar with, but I want to understand. So I think my expectation is, I would love to see, you know, like just females, not expecting that male investors will just understand what they're talking about. On the other hand, I would love to see more male investors that are willing to understand and willing to listen to, you know, because it has to come from two sides in a way.
Yes, I completely agree. Thank you. And we had a comment in the Q&A chat that said, when Tal was speaking, is it possible that male investors should move along the curve and actually, you know, educate themselves? Should we put the problem onto the sort of female founder, or is it a problem for all of us to solve? So I mean, I don't know, Tal, if you have a comment on that.
I think my comment, you should expect my comment, first of all, and it could be very easy. The person with the money is the one making the decision. You want to go your way, go find your money somewhere else. It's that easy. I mean, if you know to pitch the problem and the solution, and you know to convince that you know what you're doing, you have tested the market, you have validated, then you're not different than any cyber, fintech, blockchain, whatnot. You're just a startup. And that is common to everyone. If you are a good, and I'm saying, people say startup, they think technology. I say startup, I think people. And we all say to everyone, we investors, we invest in people, because your technology cannot talk to us, and definitely FemTech, I cannot use the technology. That's
so
our
Elena,
thing.
if we have to adjust our pitches to bring people on the journey with us, how can FemTech founders adjust their pitches to be more inclusive to kind of people that haven't had first-hand experience of the problems whilst remaining true to their vision?
Well, I think, I think it's easier than a lot of people might think. Because we investors, we look at a lot of pitch decks and we don't understand what is being pitched at the very beginning. Very often, not always, but often we don't understand what is being pitched to us. We are not aware of the problem statement that is being pitched. So I think that female founders just have to explain the problem statement, to say to explain the market, how many market size, we're not talking about tens of women. We're talking about, like Daisy said, like 100% of women will be going through menopause at some point of life. So so there is a substantial market, and how do you plan to solve this problem? So on the other hand, again, coming back to this, I would love to see more male colleagues to attend this kind of events, right? Because otherwise it's very difficult to make people aware, because there is, so one problem is like to explain the problem statement. Another problem, for example, I'm sure, that when investors look at young females and they think, okay, maybe the idea is not that bad, but she's young, she's gonna get married, she's gonna get kids, and what's gonna happen to her startup, this kind of things. I mean, we all know that it happens, and the majority of women in tech space, startup space, they're dealing with this.
I don't think we think this way. I'm sorry to say, we don't think this way anymore, and it's not because of Me Too or anything. We just don't stop thinking this way. We see female entrepreneurs with the same abilities as men. They act, but even to say like men is not right, because you don't need to. They act like they should act as themselves. It's about the person. Wait, Joe, wait just a second. You like to cut me off. Just a second. I'm saying here to all the entrepreneurs listening, it's about you and it's not about anything else. Take yourself under consideration. Just decide that, first of all, you want to get better training on how to do it the right way, because you're not born a startupper, same as you're not born a doctor or a lawyer. You're born what you're born. Then you need to learn. But none of you went to startup school. I don't know how many of you gone through acceleration programs that kind of teach you more. But in the end, you can get help. And this is the amazing part. If you now will turn to people here, in this community, in this session, in this forum right now, don't ask for money, ask for help, advice, support, training. Everyone will smile back and help you. You just need to do that. Don't wait like this and say it will happen to me, because it won't. And then the rest follows and the rest flows, but you just need to kickstart it a little bit. And this is what everyone here is trying to do. I put my details, not just for you to, I have already 7 invites. That doesn't impress me. I need to see people that want to do something with their startups, something, not with their life. I'm not a life changer. I just help you with your startup to pitch the better way, to reach it the right way, to be more prepared. This is what I'm willing to do. FemTech, SmemTech, or whatever else.
Thank you, Sal. I'd like to pull Olivia in, actually, because she's joined the panel, and I'd love just a brief introduction and comment from Olivia. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Olivia. I work at the Craftery. We're an FMCG investor. We invest across North America and Europe in businesses with kind of $20 million plus in revenue, and investing checks of sort of $20 to $75 million. If I can just touch on what Elena says, I think, there is this idea that men can't relate to sort of female products. And I do think there's an element of men like to use that excuse, but I think it's incredibly intellectually lazy from them. And so, the majority of men aren't end consumers of the products they invest in. They're not using these B2B SaaS, products at all. So it's just an excuse for them to avoid the kind of hard work around it. And I think there's 2 ways that, I think you can make pitches just far more compelling. The first is one that we've already talked about, is numbers. Numbers are really hard to ignore. And if you have big ones, people can understand. It's hard to ignore the number of women who are going to go through menopause, the number of people who are menstruating, So the more you can rely on those kind of things, I think it sort of adds gravitas to what you're talking about. The other is one about stories. People, I think, really remember stories. So I personally am a huge fan of Michael Lewis, and I think the reason his writing is so compelling is that actually he tells stories. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be your story when you're pitching, but someone's story. It'll make it far more relatable, and it'll make it far more memorable. So those would be my kind of two key things. I do think there are structural elements at play, and obviously it's a really early industry, and I think that's part of the problem too. I think these issues are it's only ever going to get easier. I think the more we have a sort of a big exit to be inspiring and for people to look at and see a trend, I think that'll be really helpful, but it's early days.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and some of the early signs are encouraging. This sector's moving in the right direction, but there's still structural obstacles at play, as well as those founders, to Tal's point, maybe need to just show the numbers, have a convincing pitch, tell a story. Elena, did you want to come back with any comment?
Yeah, look, I think it's an important conversation to have, because when I hear Tal saying, we don't think this way, I think this is in a way invalidating the experience of many of us, because we do have Tal, we had this experience, we continue to have this experience. I myself heard to this comments when I was having interviews in my early days, okay, are you applying for a sales position, but you have a child, and why don't you just stay home with your child, and this position requires travel, so it's probably not good for you. So a lot of us went through a certain experience in our lives. So first, it would be good if even though you think differently, which is great, that you also realize, take a moment and realize that this is a real problem that many of us are dealing with.
But the fact is that you're not dealing with it, because it is what it is. So you can say that you have encountered it, but can you go to an investor and say, listen, before we start, you can't, so deal with it. I posted 2 days ago a photo, me standing with 5 guys. You know what the feedback I got from women? Why is there no woman inside it? I said a winning team. Sorry, someone said, I can't click like because there is no woman. Would you see a man write this about a bunch of women hugging and saying, why there is no man in the picture? It doesn't work. Stop being something that you can do or can change. Go with the flow. Make your argument. Present like you should present. And yes, need a little bit to explain more about the subject. But again, investors look to find, riches in what they invest. They want this to grow. They want to bring themselves. With FemTech, they can bring maybe a little less in way of understanding, but a lot in the business side. And in the end, well, don't go to someone who doesn't respect you. And if you feel it the first second, stand up and leave the room. But otherwise, try and leave something in the room, at least for them to think they should behave a different way. But fighting it all the time, it's kind of weary.
When I was pitching, I met some fantastic men that maybe didn't have personal experience, but we could really relate to the founder's story of fertility challenges, and they really stepped out of their comfort zone to make the effort to understand it. There were equally women that maybe hadn't experienced it and weren't able to. But I think that it's important to kind of push the needle and try to change the ecosystem within which we're operating, because there's still so much need for change in terms of representation. I feel passionately about supporting female investors, because they can, as wealth holders or as investment decision makers in funds, really affect the innovations that come to life. So it's so important to champion diversity, not just in female founders, but in the investment landscape as well. Thank you. And Catherine, you're nodding along there. You mentioned that 1/3 of the investor community on Seedrs are female. How is that in the founder community? How many female founders are you seeing raised via your platform, and what are the trends that we can expect going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of brings up a point that kind of Eleanor said earlier. I don't see as many female founders that are going out for investment. I maybe in some cases I think that's true, but it's I think sometimes people will say that there are not as many female founders and they're not asking for investment, and that's why the statistics are as low as they are. I think that's a little kind of typical response is a little short-sighted. I think that the stats are that like 1 in 3 startups are founded by women, but then you look at the statistic in terms of the funding that goes to female startups, and it's, you know, it's much smaller. So something is going wrong there. We have it in our portfolio. It's a similar number actually. About a third of our portfolio is either female founded or co-founded, which is great. Again, always looking to push that number up. But we think that the diversity within our investor base is directly correlated to the diversity in our portfolio. The more women we have investing, the more female founded businesses we believe will get funded. And I think partly it's to do with investors understanding the topics, the struggles that female founders have you kind of go through when they pitch. And I think it's also worth saying that there are structural things at play. I think, you know, we'd like to think that gone are the days where, you know, in investor meetings, people are being asked, you know, well, are you planning on having kids? Are you, those obvious kind of, yeah, although I have just seen something in the comment section, which is quite shocking, which shows that those questions are still happening in some places. Yeah. But it's more to do with the, sometimes it's investors don't even know that they're doing it. So there have been studies that have been done which show that typically male entrepreneurs are asked promotion type questions about their business. So it's all about the opportunity and the scale of the market and how they're going to go and take advantage of that. And women are asked prevention type questions. So they're asked about the risks and what's going to stop them from doing certain things. And they're very subtle questions. And sometimes female founders actually don't know that this is happening to them until someone says, you know, you kind of compared the two side by side. But I think it's just acknowledging that some of these things are still happening, even if people don't realize that they're doing it themselves. And then from the founder perspective, it's then just, you know, what can you do? It's about controlling the controllables. So it's things that have already been mentioned, but making sure you really highlight, you know your numbers, you highlight the numbers. As I think Olivia said, it's hard to argue with numbers, right?
So I'd love to move the conversation on a little bit, just to sort of some more positive tips for our founder community that have joined us today. For each of you, I might ask, like, what's one common mistake we see from founders? It doesn't have to be female founders, actually, because, you know, we're all founders. What's really common mistakes you see? What's one really big kind of opportunity to stand out from the crowd? We've heard a little bit about storytelling, which I thought was a great one from Olivia, but maybe you could in turn have a think about some common mistakes you see and common opportunities to shine. And also, just to expand that a little bit, not just in the pitch moment, what should founders be doing before you get to the pitch meeting? Actually, is it about network or you know, really getting your numbers tight or other things? Like, it's not just the pitch meeting, it's the whole journey up to and after that point. So love your thoughts on that, please.
You should remember that there is only one first meeting you can have. So, and when you pitch, it's very, very important to do your homework. You know, there are multiple sources and with lots of opportunities to research how to pitch, how your deck is supposed to look like. You know, what should be there, what shouldn't be there, and so it's like really an easy thing to do. Do not come with like 40 slides. You know, don't start with like, we're next Uber and in 3 years we'll go public. You know, like, just don't do all of that, and just do your homework. You know, explain the problem statement, explain how you're planning to solve this, competition, how you're better, market size, and a very straightforward exercise. So and this is something you have to prepare for. So when it comes to so it's not a real mistake, but I noticed that very often female founders, they pitch slightly different from male founders because the male pitches are more aggressive. You know, I see a lot of this like, we are next Amazon, we will disrupt this, and IPO in 2 years, and things like that. Female founders, they're very accurate in their like prediction, very honest, you know, more reserved, and you, sometimes you have to be aware who you're pitching to, you know, and if it means that you have to sound, like just to go out of your comfort zone and to sell, and, then this is something you have to do.
I would add to that, since I'm giving lectures about storytelling every second day of, I'm sorry, Olivia, you go first, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, touching on that, Elena, it's interesting because I'd always wondered if that was just my own experience. I find that male founders will often present numbers that they have no, a tiny chance of hitting. And that's, every investor then automatically discounts them. They make their own projections off of that, but they're aiming for the moon. I feel a lot of the time female founders present numbers that they know they'll hit. But the problem is that if the investor is then doing that same discount, the opportunity looks far more attractive. So there's this sort of balance between wanting to present a plan that's, very exciting, but it also, achievable. And I do worry that sometimes I think female founders are extremely honest when male founders may not be.
That resonates. I definitely got feedback in that direction, that we were like, yeah, this feels like, a challenge, but totally achievable. And we don't want to be disingenuous in our pitch.
And it's crazy because female founders will always be like to me, I'll hit these numbers. I know I'm going to hit them. I can tell you. The male founders, if you ask them to put money on if they're going to hit their numbers, they're not. You're going to invest and they're going to, write them down the next month. And so I just worry that unless you've noticed that cycle, that, some of the investors are going to.
Yeah. I love that. I play a lot of poker, and I'm deciding now to bring more of those poker tactics into my pitch meetings. But anyway,
if I can add something about this,
Please.
Joe, I want to say the following. First of all, you are doing a presentation, meaning you are presenters, meaning you are actors. So first of all, start acting. That's a number one. Number two, be confident. Men would push you not because you're women, because investors act this way. They just want to see your focus. So the way we play it, we kind of throw stones at you, but some candies. Oh, so you're going to do this as well, of course. And you're going to solve this as well, of course. And you go, of course, because you only see the money. And in the end, I'm saying, listen. I'm giving you the money, but I'm feeling like you don't know where you're going. You're not going with my money. Know where you're going. Be assertive. Just know that, not because be assertive because you need to show me that you know what you're going to do with my money. Hence, you have a roadmap and you have milestones. And as much as my ideas could be good, your answer should be, great idea, phase B, not now. This is where I'm going to go. Now, you can tweak it a little bit, but of course, you need to be respectful and listen to me. But you don't have to agree with me on everything. And startups tend to do that. Women do it some more. Don't. Have your truth, have your way, make it clear. We respect it a lot, much more than you saying, okay. Be present in the room. When you enter, be present. From the second you step into the office and the second you left, also in the elevator, shush. Go out, then you talk whatever you want. Make people feel that you're inviting enough to listen to what someone tells you. But again, you don't have to agree. On the other way, don't disregard too much. Know to pitch your problem and solution. I don't care for the rest. You don't know the market better than me. You don't know competition better than me. Problem and solution is the one thing I don't know better than you. This is where you act. This is when you start explaining. You always say, what do? Immediately, you say the solution. Maybe I don't relate to the problem. Why are you sharing? I didn't sign an NDA, right? And what you're having is the next Amazon or something. Enough. Speak problem, see that I relate, I understand. You don't go ahead without it. Once I understand, explain the solution. Rest is easy.
And how might it differ a seed round, a pre-seed, or a seed round, or a Series A? What might a founder have to have up on their sleeve or dial up in a different stage of investment raising to all of you?
Let's see the investors here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, from our perspective, like the earlier you are, you have to a degree, you have less to talk about. You don't have as much traction. You might not have revenue. You have less numbers to talk about. You can talk about the size of the opportunity, but in terms of what you've done so far. So we always find that the earlier that we are working with opportunities, then the kind of the size of the being super clear on your it's already been said, but kind of on the problem and your solution. But the team is really, really important the earlier you're investing. And actually, when you're investing at pre-seed stage, then investors are investing in you as people more than anything else. So I think making sure that you're really solid on kind of your team, where the key strengths are. And if you've spotted any gaps in the experience, then plug them through advisors or mentors or whatever it might be, because that's important to investors as well.
Really helpful advice, thank you. And we're seeing some comments in the chat about actually going to your critics and people who do not believe in your product in terms of giving the most valuable feedback and seeking that out, and trying to find that constructive input, where you can kind of find holes. I don't know if that's kind of a technique that you would advise founders to look at. Maybe we can just finish, because we've got kind of a couple of minutes left, on, I think Catherine mentioned that the FemTech sector was forecast to be 1.18 trillion. I don't forget by which date, but or is that where it is now? Where is the FemTech sector going? How do we think it's not going to be a bubble? I hope that pops. This is going to be a really meaty thing that just keeps flying. But what are the hot picks? What are the trends? What should we be looking out for? And where's like a really kind of important place to look at right now? I think maybe Olivia might have something to contribute.
Sorry, I mean, I want to go back to a topic we've kind of chatted about earlier, which I think is one of taboo, which is we sort of brushed upon, which I think is one of the things that has actually held the industry back before. And I really hope that we've kind of hit a tipping point where, talking about menopause and talking about menstruation means that actually we're no longer afraid to do these things in pitch meetings, and it's sort of common dialogue. So I really hope that, we've hit that moment where we're not going back. I also really do believe there's a multiplier effect. So, as soon as we have that first major exit, the pattern for people to invest will start to really develop. In terms of sectors that I'm particularly interested in, I really think menopause, it's exciting. I think it's one that, has taboo with it. Frankly, I think as a woman, I don't know enough about menopause, and I think that's remarkable. And so I think there's a huge amount of companies to be already playing in this space, but also to continue developing, whether it be on the sort of diagnostic side, the tracking side, or the product side. So that's where I'm kind of keeping an eye out.
Sure. That's really exciting. I feel the same. I'm hitting 40 next month, and I don't know anything about it. And
yeah,
staff, that our parents' generation didn't speak of it. And we see the same. I work in fertility, so pregnancy loss, infertility, again, another really taboo subject that's just not spoken enough. And 1 in 4 pregnancies are miscarrying. And so we're doing a lot of work at Fertility Circle around the emotional support piece, and now partnering with fertility clinics to make sure that's in place across the IVF journey, which is super important and underserved. So really resonate.
That's awesome. And I hope once we start having those conversations, we don't go back, because we realize the value in them and actually how human they are and actually how common they are. And so I really, really think we're on the right path.
Great. This is turning a bit more upbeat now. Yeah. Well, it seems like an exciting time to be in the FemTech community. I'm really delighted to be kind of in the same scene as you guys, and I hope we'll cross paths again. Some of you I already know, Catherine, others I look forward to approaching in our seed round. So thank you all for your contributions. I'm going to, and your time, I'm going to hand back to Kate now, who will continue with the rest of the webinar. Thank you all for joining.
Joe, thank you for excellent moderation. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our next moderator, Dr. Ksenia Tugay. We've discussed raising capital in FemTech, and right now I would like to focus on accelerating growth in this sector. So Ksenia, welcome.
Thank you very much for the warm introduction. It's my great pleasure to be here. My name is Ksenia Tugay, all the way here from Switzerland, where it's almost night now. I work, as mentioned, for Groupe Mutuel. We are one of the biggest Swiss health insurances. Switzerland is not a very big country. We're only 8 million people, but we're one of the leading healthcare providers. Healthcare insurance providers here. And I also wearing a second hat today. I am project lead for Tech Forever, which is a FemTech accelerator that we have launched in 2021 with an external partner here in Switzerland, EPFL Innovation Park. I encourage you all to check it out, and to stay tuned for December 7, when we're going to have a closing ceremony and summarize the results of the first year of our acceleration program. Also, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. And it is my great pleasure to open this panel. And we are going to start with Elissa Baker, who is managing partner at Phase 2 Health. And Elissa, are you here?
Yeah, right here.
Cool. Elissa is going to tell us about identifying product market fit and defining realistic revenue strategy. Thank you, Elissa. The floor is yours.
Okay, first of all, I just want to say I'm really happy to be here. FemTech is an emerging space. It's been emerging for a while, but it's really starting to gain the traction that I've been hoping to see for a long time. I've been in healthcare for over 10 years, starting out as a nurse, and I've been in the tech side since roughly about 2011. It started here in the US, where I'm based and where I do most of my work, with a big EHR boom, with everyone's records going from paper to electronic, and then just watching whatever's been able to build off of that since then has been really exciting. Most of it has been outside of the women's health sector, and most of it has been focused on companies that really are led by men. So I know that's been a big topic of discussion today, and just being in this industry for as long as I have been, I haven't seen as many female founders as I would like to see. And I really do just think that men are better at selling mediocrity than we are. Here in the US, if you went to Harvard, if you have a certain pedigree and a certain network, that seems to be enough to get you by for funding. But we as women really have to step up and prove ourselves and prove our worth and really prove that we're going to be able to make a difference with our tech. As it relates to FemTech in general, I have found that when I do talk to male VCs, that they really don't know a lot about what's going on with the female body and how this fits into the market and how it helps. So product market fit is a big deal. You really have to show, how you make an impact financially, because it's more than a black and white thought. So I'm going to dive into that today and then talk a little bit about structuring your business model. So again, started out as a nurse, have worked for multiple startups here in the US, building out marketing and sales foundations. I'm a managing partner at Phase 2, where I focus on the marketing and growth side of things. I'm an advisor for FemTech Lab, which is based in London. And then I'm co-founder and president of Mama, which is a postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety solution here in the US. I'll talk mainly about the United States healthcare system because that's what I know best. It is a bit different from maybe many of your own healthcare systems and where you may fit in the market there, but hopefully you'll be able to take from this presentation as well. And hopefully if any of you are thinking of expanding over here, you'll find it to be helpful. When you enter the US healthcare market, you will discover almost consistently that there is a low willingness to pay from consumers with any direct-to-consumer product that doesn't really change something that you can't see in the mirror. So we're a very superficial society. You can generally get somebody to jump on board with weight loss, anything related to aging, beauty, but it's a lot tougher to get into those deeper pieces of healthcare that impact our bodies coming from the consumer. Hospitals and providers are generally a decent window to go into to get to that patient and to build trust and to get them to use a product or a solution, but there's a low willingness from them to pay. It isn't that they're necessarily trying to be difficult, they're themselves also struggling to gain reimbursement from our kind of complicated healthcare system. And so that's what you're really going to have to prove out to them. Same with insurers, they want proof that your solution works, and that takes a long time to give them, and they have a very long sales cycle. On the employer side, it is a little bit more exciting to be on that side of the market, but it's becoming very saturated. Employers generally want to be able to offer their employees really great perks and benefits that show that they are seen and can keep them happy and keep them employed by their company. But it is highly competitive. And if you have a solution where there are many other solutions at the market, it's very tough to get a seat at the table. There are also expensive barriers related to tech and privacy, and you need to achieve things called high trust, which can be very expensive and time consuming. And ultimately, investors always need to know how your solution is being paid for. They need to see a scalable business model. We often at Phase 2 and throughout all of healthcare, we like to talk about what is called the chasm. So when you start out as a product, you're generally going to have early techies. They're the early innovators. They're really interested and excited about what you're doing. They're willing to jump on board. The sale feels easy. It's a really exciting time. Then you have those early adopters that are generally visionaries as well. Not quite as easy to convert as the techies, but they jump on as well. Moving from that stage over into the majority of those who will jump on board to getting your product can be very difficult, and you can often fall into the chasm. And that is where you need to really lean on your techies and your visionaries, those early adopters and innovators, to understand if you have proper product market fit and how your solution is working for them, how it has tweaked, how you had to tweak it to meet their initiatives, and what the ROI is for them. You're going to be able to use those stories and those metrics to convert the early majority. So we'll talk a bit about product market fit. I'm going to go through each one of these bullets and tell you just a little bit of a story for each one, because I do think that's the best way to kind of use examples. Product market fit is going to be very different upon every single product that's out there. You might fall into similar buckets, but I really like to have individual discussions with people about achieving product market fit for their particular solution, because you're just going to offer a different perspective on the market and a different way to approach some of the issues. So I will share this deck with the FemTech Analytics team, and anybody who wants to reach out with questions, please do. Oftentimes you find out that you have the wrong product. It doesn't necessarily mean that the solution that you want to solve isn't solvable with your product. It just means that you aren't solving a big enough pain point. So you're not showing maybe a provider or a health system or even a consumer a large enough ROI. Your market size or your TAM is too small. And I've included in here a link to a really wonderful article that helps you determine your TAM and how to reach your market. And the market may be oversaturated. So we'll tell you a story about oversaturation. We had a startup that we worked with not long ago that was selling into the employer market. They were a digital musculoskeletal solution, and they were great at reducing opioid usage. It's just perfect, right? Usually in that digital musculoskeletal market, you have users that skew a bit older. So tech can't be overcomplicated. There were several large competitors, billion-dollar companies in the space with them, whose tech was great and exciting on paper. You went to their website, it was really beautiful. You got really excited about it. They were able to build up a lot of hype because they had a lot of money that they were able to get investors on board to give them. This one was a little bit smaller solution. They'd been around the longest. They had really figured out how to get their users to consistently use them, and their opioid rates were the lowest of all, amongst other things like overall medical spend and things like that. But they were small, and they weren't able to get traction very quickly, and they weren't able to get their story out there very quickly. The market was becoming extremely oversaturated, and despite their product probably being the best on the market, the bigger names won out. It was a sad situation. The founder was female, the bigger names were male, and so that was a tough piece to watch happen. So you need to always determine if you're in the right market. You might have the right product, but the market may be so oversaturated that you need to shift things up a bit. We had discussions with them about trying to move into a different market where they maybe would have been helping kidney patients so that they can move their bodies more, because that's a common issue with dialysis, but they didn't want to wrap their head around being outside of the market that they were currently in, which was just impossible to scale in at that point. It could be that you have the wrong message. You might have tremendous value and you're just not communicating it accurately. One of the most common things we coach our startups on with their marketing is when we arrive to your website, we almost immediately need to know what you offer, especially if you are selling in the direct-to-consumer space. When I come, I need to know what I'm looking at. I need to know what I'm about to pay for. Flowery language can only get you so far. And then if you're selling into the provider or the health system space, you really need to be able to articulate exactly how you're solving their pain point and either reducing their revenue, increasing their revenue, increasing any reimbursement that they may be receiving from here in the US, things like Medicaid, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, our insurers, or how you are lowering their costs. Maybe you fit in a way that reduces their workflows or reduces certain staff that they need or helps free up time for staff to do other activities. So you have to really kind of fit into that pain point and show where you make an impact. Or you might have the wrong audience. The story I have here is I recently learned of a really awesome solution that can detect breast cancer early by, and bear with me as I tell you about this, by pumping the breast, a little bit of fluid comes out, and then they're able to test that and detect breast cancer. And let's think about that in two different markets. Let's think about it in a direct-to-consumer market as your audience. Me hearing that just as a woman, as soon as I heard like, oh my gosh, I have to pump my breast at home and test it at home, My provider isn't around. They're not going to be able to walk me through it if I did it wrong. They're not going to be able to explain their results to me. That kind of freaks me out, and I'm not really overly interested in that. I'd rather like have my blood drawn by my provider or something. So I'm immediately kind of lost as the consumer. But if they were to take that solution over to the provider, selling into the right market where they're able to achieve benefits from what we would call downstream revenue, that would be the most beneficial market for them to sell into. And so what that looks like is the provider uses the apparatus or the tool, they walk their patient through what to do, the patient goes through the entire process, the pumping, they test, they find out they're at risk, then the provider is able to send them to their imaging center for an MRI, mammography, and run any genetic testing. There is downstream revenue in all of those services that are a benefit to the provider. So we have now built a case for that particular solution. I made a note on here that it's really important to remember that product market fit when it comes to healthcare and health tech is more than just missing need for consumers. Consumers are very tough to engage with. It's very tough to engage consumer with their own health, as I've said. So you have to find a way into the market through multiple channels, and it takes time. Once you enter into the market, you have to work to build trust. Trust can come in 4 different buckets. You can build trust by network, and that you are a known person in the healthcare field. You have professional accomplishments that may precede you. You may have started other startups. You may have worked as a doctor. You may have been, successful in research. You bring a little bit to the table, and you also bring relationships to the table. Selling into healthcare is very relationship based. Trust by association, you want to bring on the right investors, the right advisors, and the right early customers to help you build that trust by association. With investors, they need to have a network that they can introduce you to, and they need to completely understand your product, you, and what you're bringing to the table, and understand the problem that you're solving so they can speak about you. Same with advisors. They need to advise you along the way, but also be able to tap into their own network and talk about you as well. And with your customers, you need to be able to bring them on, and they need to be willing to share the story about you help them achieve certain initiatives. Trust by evidence would be any peer-reviewed publications you can do. A lot of investors like to see research. They like to see that you've proved it out. Same with any early adopters and even those laggers at the very end of that chasm that I showed you, or the curve I showed you. They really like to see proof. Industry article mentions are great. There's a lot of great healthcare publications here in the United States, I'm sure throughout Europe as well. And then if you're going in the direct to consumer market, it can become very fun because you can work with lots of different publications that are out there. When I share this with you, you'll be able to read this case study that we did with a company called Viver here in the United States. They're a patient financial application platform that helps cancer patients afford their high cost medications. We did a case study with a major health system here in the United States called Advocate Aurora Health, where you'll be able to read about how Viver helped the initiatives of the hospital. So the case study is less focused on what the solution is and how great it is, and more focused on the initiatives of the hospital and how Viver was able to fit into that goal. And that's going to be really key. You have to understand what your customer needs to achieve and how you can help them achieve it. That is more important than talking up your solution and how great it is. That kind of comes later after you've met with them and understand where you need to take them. I shared this slide with you as well because it is kind of in that trust field. We came up with a great message for Viver, is that they're your trusted financial assistant platform. That really resonated and worked well for them. We showed a lot of their different stats and what they were able to achieve over time, and then shared a lot of the different major health systems that they were working with. When they present the slide to potential customers, it really resonates with them and really helps build up that relationship. I'll talk to you a little bit about business model. Make sure I'm not running out of time here. So when you're working with investors and you're trying to get traction on your investments, you're going to need to be able to show growth and ROI. You're going to need to understand who's going to pay for your solution and how. In order to do that, you need to look at the major problem that you're solving and the cost of that problem annually to the organization that you're talking to, or perhaps just in general. So I'm going to share with you here a sample business model. You can go in and look at it. I'll pull it up quickly for you so you can see it. This was built out for a company that we got funding for. They're very early stage and growing now, but you can see this is how they were able to ask for their pre-seed round. And it has every single thing that they thought they would spend money on, kind of how they would grow over time with customer success, data scientists, their creative team, And then most importantly, what a cash out date would be, where they would potentially run out of money, and then show how much cash on hand, how they were making money, and it looks at it over a course of a year. I'm not going to dive too much into it and talk about it. You can look at it, and if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll give you one example though. With Mama, the postpartum depression app that I'm working on currently, this is a $14 billion annual problem in the US. It impacts over 600,000 women, with more cases going undiagnosed that are, and we anticipate that caseload to go up every single year as it's becoming more and more common to talk about it. $30,000 is the average cost per untreated patient with postpartum depression in the US. And our solution, we have determined, would save a provider or an employer about $3,600 with the service that we provide. Knowing that, we typically look to see a 10x ROI. So we take 10% of the savings that we are able to show them, and then they receive the 10x ROI. TAM for investors, we anticipate grabbing about 15% of the market, which would be about 150,000 women, bringing in 360 per year, equating to roughly 54 million in revenue. That's the dream goal, and that's what we're working towards. So it gives you something to work back from, and it gives you something to have that initial conversations with investors and talk about how it's being afforded. This is the employer model. It's a little bit different when we look at it from a provider's perspective. From there, where our solution would help bring in $3.5 million in annual reimbursement revenue through increasing their HEDIS measures, which is a Medicaid measure here in the US, and helping them negotiate higher contracts with payers here in the US. From that, we would take 10%. And so our contract with that specific organization would be $350,000. In addition to a good business model, you need to be able to prove ROI to your customer. And the reason why that is such a strong benefit is you learn more about their business and their direction, their initiative, and where you fit in, similar to that Fiverr case study that you'll all be able to take a look at. It will help you provide focus on product development. Sometimes you're going to need to pivot your solution to help increase the ROI. And then you'll be able to take that and have that, it's almost a domino effect. You do it for one, you know what works. You're going to be able to do it consistently across the board for other systems and other organizations and partners of yours. Helps you provide focus for implementation and support. You'll be able to show a growth strategy and scalable business model to investors. You'll continuously validate your value, and it will help with the stickiness of your partnership. If you can show year over year that you're really increasing ROI for the particular organization that you have a contract with, they're going to consistently partner with you. If tracked appropriately, it can create a continuous marketing stream for you with content, case studies. Oftentimes your customers will be so happy they'll sit on a panel for you, you'll go to conferences with them, and you continue to work through that.
I'm sorry, we have to move on. This is solid gold. I mean, I'm so happy we're going to have the slides after. I think this is so helpful. I want to thank you very, very much for this, and I'm sure the audience as well. I look forward to asking you a bunch of more questions at the panel. But unfortunately for everyone, but also fortunately for everyone, we have to move on to
questions. Please send me a message after today. I'm happy to help.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And now it's my great pleasure to present our next speaker, Priyanka Mandirata, who is the founder and CEO of Unmute. I hope I pronounced your name correctly and your second name as well. And Priyanka is going to tell us about the challenges of raising capital for business owners in the FemTech industry. Priyanka, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for welcoming. Hello, everyone. As I said, my name is Priyanka Mandirata. I'm the founder and CEO of Unmute. I'm joining you all from Toronto, Canada. First of all, I know that this is a virtual event and we all are working from home mostly. So I request all of you, if you're multitasking or if you're distracted by your family or your pets, let's bring back our attention to this conversation, especially because this event and the team has done a fantastic job to bringing us together. So let's give them a round of kudos and give our attention back to this conversation. Before I get started and share my slides, I'm going to ask you to pay attention because I'm going to bring a different lens to this conversation. All right, so just a little bit about my story, why I'm here and why we're having this conversation. I've recently been recognized as one of the top 10 most influential women in technology by 2020. I was featured for my work in Valiant CEO magazine. I'm the 10 most inspiring leaders to follow by Insight Success magazine for 2022. I'm a startup mentor, a certified coach. I have 15 years in talent management in banking industry, managing a portfolio of $30 million in talent management and building the next league of leaders, especially the women leaders and allies, and founder and CEO of Unmute. You guys must be thinking, oh my God, she's so successful. But here's the story. I am not here sitting in this room based on my successes. As a founder and CEO, I'm here based on my failures. I failed as a mother, as a daughter, as woman in business, in relationships. I have embraced my failure. And if you're not failing, you're not succeeding. So everyone in this room, all I can ask you before I dive into this conversation further, get comfortable with failure. If you're not failing, if you're only launching and talking about your business, reaching for success, that's the wrong way to go. Hold that thought and we move forward. I founded Unmute in the middle of the pandemic to build the next generation of women leaders and at the same time bring allies to the conversation, because it's been 200 years we're being pitched against the men. However, we have to make sure we are bringing them in those conversations, because guess what? It's a lone battle and we won't be able to solve anything alone. Conversation, the topic here is raising capital in FemTech. What are the opportunities and challenges? We will not be having this conversation, let's be very honest, if this industry would have called MenTech. That's the challenge we are dealing with, even though the opening slide Tal said it's an industry where there's a conversation for everybody, but let's be very honest, we are still failing because there's a bias that we are inherited from this society. But the good thing, is FemTech the next big thing? Yes, it is. It's a shiny object, and especially the pandemic has brought so many of health conversations forward. So it has been a blessing in disguise. If you look at the numbers, we being going to be in this industry increased from 57.9 billion. That's the projection, and that's the scope and opportunities we will be working towards. So let's not lose hope. I'm going to give you a few seconds. Just want to make sure I have your attention here to go through this slide and look at the numbers. 36.7% growth will only come from North America, and the rest of the world can join in. So just take these few details with you as we have this conversation. Moving along, what are some of the challenges? One thing, as an entrepreneur in North America, as an entrepreneur that's been dealing with global clients, one of the things I would like to bring to the table, it's called social conditioning. Social conditioning is a training of people to think and act in a way that is positively and negatively reinforced by our society. And you must be thinking, Priyanka, what is it? Phases of social conditioning for women, and hold your breath. From the time we are born to adolescence to adulthood, we have been given a picture from the time we are born that we are good with the dolls, we are here to look good, and our end journey as adults stay in the kitchen. I'm turning 42 in 2 weeks. My journey hasn't changed. If you ask my mother, the society had the same expectations. When we are talking about men going to Mars, we are still facing this bias in the industry. Let's accept that. On the overcourse, phases of social conditioning for men, from the time they are born, it's been benefited to them. They've been looked at as role models. They're looking at somebody who are strong, and they've been looked at in adulthood as they are born to lead. So this is a discrimination, the biases we are following, and it's not going to go away. What can we do differently? As women, we've been taught to be perfect, that perfection has to go. That's why fail, lead, and leadership, it's a mindset. You don't have to be an entrepreneur or a title to hold your conversations or to invite inputs or sell your idea. Own it in your conversation and move forward. What 3 things that we can learn if we have to succeed? 3 things I will tell you. That we are not the weaker sex. We are not here only to raise kids. We can build businesses. We can sell the next big idea. We really have to learn. And this is something we have to bring it to the table. Men are not the only one who can lead. As much as we can, we are born to lead, and we're going to face these discrimination every step of the way. However, I am asking you to unlearn that behavior. Instead of blaming the market, the ventures, the bosses, the fathers, and the husbands and the partners, I am asking every woman on this call today, unlearn that you can do it and invite men in the conversation. So where are we losing? I know Tal mentioned some of the data here. Out of the entire population, 5 men have the same wealth as half of the planet. 51% of the population, which is women, we only receive 2.2% of the capital. I would like to remind you one thing. We are not just 50%, 51% of the population. I don't like that word. I call myself and all women, we are 51% of the talent. We are the talent that's untapped, and it's up to us how we need to unleash our potential together. And that's what we need to unmute. Moving along. What are the funding sources? If you look at historically, these are the funding sources we always go to. And the first thing, especially as a woman entrepreneur, we say, do we have the money to bring these ideas? All I'm asking you today, money is only way where we think that this is the way we're going to build our ideas, sell our services. I'm asking you, we are living in a time where we are so blessed with the power of social media. Money is important, but if you have an idea that is solving a problem, solving any issues for women, anything on the planet, test it out with your network, with your families, use the power of social media. Do not stop if you don't have the funding. Look at these funding sources, and something I would like to bring it on the table as my experience. What I have done differently is I would like to introduce a model called SHIO. So SHIO is a perpetuity fund which is launched in Canada. It's been 5 years. And right now, as a business, we are present. I'm one of the activators. I'm one of the entrepreneurs and funders with SHIO, which simply means women like you and me, we pool in $100. I'm just giving an example every month, and we raise capital. It's like sisters are coming in the room and funding. So right now we have 5,000 activators who are funding ventures from our own money. So instead of buying those fancy shoes and fancy bags, we are investing in the next women who are solving big industries.
Thank you, Priyanka. Unfortunately, we need to move on. Really so inspiring. I think you're bringing very, very important issues. Please, everybody, go and check out. We're going to have your slides after the event. Really, wow. I mean, I think you really raised some points here that are, stuck in our head, and they're fundamentally wrong and they're holding us back. And I think this is time that we change it. With that, I thank you, and I look forward to discussing with you later at the panel. And I would like to introduce our next speaker, Alexa Beans. Are you here with us, Alexa?
I'm in.
Thank you, Alexa. Alexa is a partner in Halogen Ventures, and we're going to continue the fundraising theme and how to approach it. Alexa, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Hi, people all over the universe. I imagine it may be very late where you are, so thanks for hanging in there. And a little bit about me as some context. I am in the privileged position I am as an investor because my father was an entrepreneur in ultrasound. Many of the first pictures in their promo materials were of my big sister. I went on to study public health at Stanford, and for many years worked on public health campaigns. So communicating about what we can do to live healthier, happier lives was sort of the beginning of my career, working with Planned Parenthood, the CDC, and MTV, Fox, Walgreens, the NBA. We worked on big national public health campaigns about STDs and HIV prevention. Today, I'm zooming in as a venture capitalist. I got into this work because my sisters and I sort of looked around and said, what are some of the things that we're really passionate about that we think the world needs to do a better job of, and women's health is a big piece of sort of the things we wanted to address. Now I'm on Jessie Draper's team at Halogen Ventures. Halogen invests specifically in co-ed teams and female founders, and she has had some successes already in FemTech. This is L sold to P&G. We are also investors in the Flex company, which is another patented tampon alternative company here in Los Angeles. We have invested a bit in the menopause space and in addressing cervical cancer. So I'd say if there is a FemTech pitch, it's very likely we've met a company doing something similar in the consumer space. And I wanted to sort of take this time to give you all a little bit of perspective so that you can understand your audience when you're pitching, because I think sometimes it feels like people just have excuses or they don't get it, and that's why they're passing on investing. And I figured I could use this time to sort of share our perspective. I help a lot of our founders fundraise, and so a big part of what I do is help teach them and learn with them, quite honestly, why people are saying no to us so that we can better use our time and energy. I think one of the biggest, most obvious ones is sort of, what does your company make? Right now, venture capital is primarily going towards SaaS companies, digital technology companies. So if you make a hardware device or a physical good, anything related to menstrual products, or I'd say sort of tools that you might use for incontinence, etc. One of the big reasons that people might be passing on investing in you is you are not a SaaS tech company. So we've talked a lot about the biases and the misunderstandings that sometimes female founders or FemTech founders face. But I think the number one reason people are probably passing is that their portfolio is made up of tech products, and they shy away from hardware, consumer packaged goods, and or community and content companies. So that's one reason people might be passing. That's not to say there isn't money in that space for those things, but you just should be a little more concentrated about who you're reaching out to, because otherwise that could be a very frustrating experience. So for instance, a couple places where you might be able to find, say you are building a hardware solution or a consumer packaged goods company, there are some different pockets of money that I would recommend you hunting down. NFX Signal is one database where you can sort for who invests in hardware. Similarly, I like to use Crunchbase to reverse engineer who invested in what. So if you have a consumer packaged goods company, you might look up other consumer packaged goods companies that you respect and have done well, and in Crunchbase, you can see who their early supporters were. Another big reason why people might pass on investing is it's not a good fit. Stage is the number one, I think, thing to learn. We've had a couple gals who have presented already in this conference that are later stage, and there's no reason really to talk to somebody if you are looking to raise $1 million who writes checks of $5 million. So as you get going on your fundraising journey, I think a really helpful exercise is to create that Google Sheet or Excel sheet or Airtable where you're tracking not only who are the people who invest in hardware or invest in CPG or what have you, you're making your wish list, but you should also take a look at when do they invest so that you're being respectful of your own time, and you're only talking to people who invest at the same stage as you. Across the globe, the definition of seed or Series A or Series B sort of varies. And so I'd say the best you can do is probably make an estimate based on where you're seeing what announcements, what PR announcements there's. You'll say, so-and-so just participated in a $12 million XYZ round for this or that company. That tells you that they're maybe a little later stage than what you're looking for if you're looking to raise 2 million, 3 million, etc. I'd say another reason that we end up passing quite a bit is that we really look for first or second movers. So I mentioned Jessie already has had an exit in an organic tampon company, and that sold to P&G in 2019. So about once a week, I get pitched a new tampon solution. And I'd say that's not a first or second mover idea. So what I mean by first or second mover is that you are truly bringing some major innovation to the market. The Flex company, which we invested in starting in 2018, I believe, she has a patented product. And this is similar to where the diaphragm goes, something that slides up past the cervix and sits and rests for up to 12 hours a day to collect menstrual fluid. So that to us, it's still a first mover. She's the only one doing it. So when you're getting passes, it could be that there's a little bit of a copycat product where you might be pitching something that people have seen before. I think another thing to think about in terms of that fit, if you're working on that database of VCs to reach out to, is all the kind of like keyword hip trends that you are riding. And I'd say, for instance, we are consumer investors, and we're investing in things like FemTech and wellness, but also think about some of the other sort of categories that you might fall under. So for instance, if you're in healthcare, it might be in employer-sponsored or employer-backed kind of like fertility health. Carrot fertility is what I'm thinking of. So when you're targeting sort of which VCs you want to talk to, you sort of want to think about like what is interesting about your company or your business model. They'll say, oh, we invest in marketplaces. And so you're like, great, I'm a marketplace. Boom, 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 boom. Hit up all of the VCs who invest in marketplaces. Or I invest in enterprise. Perfect. Make sure you're focusing if you're selling into enterprises, on the enterprise investors. So it's a little bit about finding, just like product market fit, you're finding investor fit.
Thank you so much, Alexa. I mean, I hate that all this is so short. I want to spend like 1 hour with each one of you. Really cool. More to discuss in the panel. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. Thank you so much. Let's move to our next speaker, and that will be a recorded interview. And it's my great pleasure to present Caitlin Tregenza, who is head of venture capital at Twinam Investments, and she's also angel investor and scale-up coach in FemTech and Sextech.
Lovely to see you, Caitlin. We just have a few questions for you today about your expertise in investment and the FemTech space. As you know, for a lot of founders in the startup stage, there are many different strategies to approach investment, and one of those is through an accelerator program. At this stage, is it realistic to receive funding in the FemTech space without completing an accelerator program?
Yeah. So there are a number of different things, I guess, that I would say to that to start to sort of like run into that. First of all, the FemTech space is very nascent in the global scheme of all venture capital. So we're seeing a lot more funds coming. We're seeing a lot more companies coming. It's very chicken and egg. Companies are, raising small funds. very regularly, and they have a lot of opportunity to start placing capital. We are seeing a few different accelerators coming online and taking cohorts through, but this is all very new. It's a very new and emerging space. So I think the first thing that I want to make founders aware of is that, if you aren't a graduate of an acceleration or an incubation program, then that doesn't preclude you from participating in any kind of activity, raising your company's profile online or via the traditional VC routes is still something that's available. If, however, you look at the acceleration programs, the biggest advice that I suppose that I could give to founders who are a little bit nervous about whether or not they've, graduated or not graduated from an accelerator is, well, what do companies get out of an accelerator program? So where are they up to? Where's their go-to-market? Where's their scaling strategy? Where's their team composition? I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of FemTech founders don't necessarily really realize, is that there is no room for superwoman in this space. You cannot tear down the patriarchy, raise a new company, raise funds, and do it all alone. How are you fleshing out your team? And that is one of the things that an accelerator program and an incubation program will really teach you how to do, is build a team. And if you can't get other people to work for you or join your team, that's a really good question as to why. So if someone won't come and work with you or alongside you, is your mission big enough? Is your vision big enough? Does it encompass people beyond yourself? Can you sell it to your employees or your co-founders first? And if not, how are you going to sell that to investors? So I think that you can use the acceleration programs that exist to start holding yourself to that accountability, and how to build out your, and flesh out the company, flesh out the strategies. So even if you're not a graduate, you can still use that structure for yourself. But if you're a many times founder, or you're an entrepreneur who's been around the block in different industries, then you probably don't need an accelerator necessarily. The other thing that people ask me is, I can't get, I don't know what a FemTech accelerator or incubator would look like. Can I go into a different kind of industry? And maybe you can.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. I think the next step when assessing or approaching investment is, a lot of times we try to get into the investor's head. What are they after when approaching investment? Really understanding their priorities. I'm curious, from your experience, how do you approach making investment decisions?
I love the way that you asked that question, Megan, and I want to go back and really assess something here, because this is actually a really key piece of information that I want to reframe for founders. I want to reframe this for all founders, but I really want to reframe this for female founders. It is not your job to contort yourself to your investors. Really big pause on that. I need everyone to understand this. It is your job as a founder to understand the problem that you're solving in the world, and understand that the strategy that you are deploying for hitting that massive moonshot goal, that is your goal. When you have your vision, when you have your mission so clearly defined in your own self as the founder, that is contagious. It is infectious. And so that is when you start to see that employees or co-founders or partners, companies will come magnetically towards you. And when that happens, your investors will follow. Trying to do it the outside in methodology, trying to say, what do investors want? Creating a pitch deck that speaks to those particular assets of, this is the kind of company that, you know, XYZ fund is searching to back, and then working and, you know, reverse engineering that back into how your company operates. That is not going to be the formula for success, and you're going to attract the wrong kinds of investors, the wrong kinds of partners, and the wrong kind of co-founders and employees. And fundamentally, you're not going to really be mission driven in the goal that you're here to do. The advantage that FemTech founders have, and this is so important for every one of you to internalize, is that you are starting a journey that no one else has ever sought to solve before. You are choosing a problem that is so huge. It affects 51% of the population, at least, and then you segment down from there, depending on what your company is. But no one else is coming to solve that. We've been on this planet for a really long time, and these are the problems that have persisted. No one else is doing it but you. And that level of confidence in self, in mission, in vision, in what you're here to do, should lead everything that you do, including your investor conversations. And my sense of it is that most founders are doing it exactly the opposite way. They're trying to work out what the formula for success is in getting investment, and coming back and saying, okay, let me build a pitch deck around that. And that's only ever going to get you so far. So I think I've answered the question in the sense of, once you understand what you're here to do, what your company's mission is to solve, and that unwavering faith that you are the right team and you are the right people to take that to the world and change that problem, you will naturally have a different sense of power in those conversations with investors, and you will have a different sense of strategy from the internal creation of that vision outwards. And so that would be the way that I would really approach investment. But we can get into some specific problems. But I think that the foundation of how you approach investment is not to let yourself contort and be pulled one way or the other with investors, but to really see that you are this dynamic group of people who have chosen at this time on the planet to change the future trajectory of how women will operate on the planet. And that people should be fighting to invest in you and lead the conversations from that energy.
That's fantastic. So from your perspective, as an investor, you're looking for founders and teams who have that gumption to take on those big problems, and, you know, nothing will stand in their way to get there. Is that what I'm hearing? I
think that it doesn't matter. You know, I started in the climate space in terms of where I started my investment portfolio, and what I found, and the reason that I shifted into FemTech or you know, the umbrella of all of these things that can classify as female empowerment. So fintech that focuses on women's financial empowerment, sex tech that focuses on female sexuality and owning the body and owning the life that you live, and all of these other aspects of health and empowerment. The reason that I shifted, and it was very specifically highlighted during COVID, was that the playing field wasn't equal. You know, I was coming to those kinds of conversations my whole career as a female VC, but equally so were the female founders. And so at some point, there was this beautiful opportunity to know that founders were solving problems that I needed fixed. And that's why I'm talking about this. Talk to the people who understand the problem that you're trying to solve. If you are a health company talking about uterus health, or a fertility company, or something that is so specifically female that male male VCs would never truly be able to understand, even if they're going through fertility issues at home themselves. When you are your most powerful is when you are talking to people who already have your problem. And the founders that I talk to continue to say that is where they find their investors. When they talk from the heart, when they talk from their soul, when they know that they're here to solve a problem, and they create a safe space that their investor can also put down their walls and also say, you know, this affects me, or this affects my sister or my mother or whoever else. And it's not just the data, you know, it's not just the data of these huge problems, you know, of 1 in 10 women or 1 in 7 women, depending on where you get your data, that are affected by endometriosis, and takes, you know, 7 to 8 years to get a diagnosis. These kinds of things are really difficult to connect to. And we are often, when we're coming back to your accelerator question, we're often told to stand behind huge numbers of faceless people. Why? We're women, we're in community. That's what we do. Why don't you create a sense of community, even if your community is just you and that one single investor in the room? How do you connect? How do you create that sisterhood in that moment of saying, let's do this together? How do you create that invitation for change between you and that other person in the room, even if that person happens to be a male? So I think that, yes, you have to have the gumption, you have to have that big vision, you have to have the talent and the team behind you and the science behind you, whatever your particular company is, but you also have to create that invitation to change.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, and this is a little bit off script, but a lot of times we approach investment with this this mindset that, especially in FemTech, there needs to be a long point of education in your pitch, particularly if there's no woman in the room. And like you're saying, through telling these stories, that, you know, that's a lot easier to the go if there's someone in the room who is able to have that experience. And some of the ways that we address that is saying we need more women in investment, and these kinds of dynamics to be able to put more power and capital in the hands of women and in FemTech. I'm curious how you see how we continue to go forward, but still not preach to our own choir. And if that's too big of a goal for us, if the first initial goal should just be solving these individual problems. And again, going off script, so this can be edited if you feel, but thought the conversation was going, so.
Yeah, so I think that at the end of the day, you can talk to gender, you can talk to sex, or you can talk to human experience. And I think that there's always an opportunity to be able to tell a story from a place of truth that will always connect with somebody. If you are not creating an invitation for someone to care about your startup and your mission, then it doesn't really matter how many people you talk to about data and statistics. That's not how we operate on the planet. And I think that it's always that assumption that, you know, VCs are these really scary people that are going to give you 5 to 10 minutes of their time and then kick you out of the room. It is a job. It is a job to go out and find great founders and great companies solving massive world issue problems. FemTech deals with 51% of the population, but we've been treating that 51% as a minority. And so, to your point, how do you actually get, if you happen to be pitching to a room of all male investors, how do you get them to understand women? Well, I can tell you that every single one of those men was birthed by a woman. So they might know one. You know, I think that daughters are very powerful change agents for men. And it's my first question to people, you know, what is it that made you want to see my pitch today? Because they'll tell you. If you don't know the context of the room that you're speaking to, ask them. I think that's another thing. You do not need to go in there cold, stand like a robot, deliver a pitch, and then hope and like just stand for feedback. You're allowed to diligence back your investors. You're allowed to decide whether these people are appropriate investors for your company. And in fact, if I were to give one, really dynamic piece of takeaway advice to everybody, it would be walk in the room as if they're the ones you're assessing about whether or not they're coming into your company. And the reason that I say that is, you don't go into your first date and start deciding the details of your wedding and your 50th wedding anniversary, right? You go on a date and you're both assessing each other. You're understanding fit, you're understanding culture, you're understanding values, you're understanding ethos, you're understanding operating principles. Why does this fund do what it does? Why does this meeting have to happen today? And if you don't know that, ask. If you don't know why you're the most important person in that room, work it out really quickly, because the other thing that people need to understand is that investors invest, founders create. Do not let investors take away your capacity to create something that doesn't exist on the planet anymore by asking you, ridiculously, the kinds of questions that would deplete your power instead of empower you. And if you feel like your power is being taken away from you by these bro investors, you are well within your right to reframe the question. You are well within your right to say, I think what you're trying to ask me is this. That's not really what we're trying to do. So let me tell you, let me just come back to vision here. Let me come back to mission. I feel like you've missed something in what we're trying to do. And that's perfectly, fine, because you haven't had this life experience. So let me explain from a story of this or that or whatever. This is a conversation. This is not something where you get tested and then it's a one-way street. You are constantly testing back. If you don't like the tone of the voice, if you don't like the way that they're conducting the pitch session, you can cut it short and you can say, it actually doesn't feel like we're a cultural fit. And this might not be the space that you guys are really willing to take a chance on. And so at this point in time, this doesn't feel like something that we would probably pursue. And in the interest of everybody's time, let's end it there. Find your tribe, and your tribe is your investors. Because if you don't have investors that are really, going to bat for you, don't marry them.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds very similar to how, the advice given to job interviews, that you're both there. You need them just as much as they need you, and it should be a good fit for everyone. So I think that's fantastic advice.
Yeah, and I often get my founders who are doing a later stage raise to actually go and speak to their happy investors or investee companies. So ask them, can I speak to 5 or 6 of your portfolio companies to get a sense of the experience? How do you participate? Or you can say, these are our vision aligned goals in the world, and this is what we want to do by 2030 or 20 whatever. What kind of role do you see yourself playing in that?
Fantastic. Yeah, get some references. Well, that's some fantastic advice. Just to wrap things up today, I'm just curious if there's any other key success factors that you'd like to share with potential FemTech founders or current FemTech founders, and if there's any further advice as we part today.
Yeah, so I think let's go over what we said. Definitely this is a team game. If you are showing up as a single founder or just a team of 2, you need to tell your investors how you're going to flesh out that team. No empires were built with one single person or even 2 people. So what is your HR strategy? How are you getting people involved? How are you building out that team? And how are you building your tribe? What's your strategy around scaling your own internal company, and then that translates into your go-to-market, into your business model. That also will help you to understand how to delegate, how to not do everything. I think that the moment that a founder steps out of the vision seat of the company and into the doing seat of the company, you are just naturally going to limit your growth. So if you are not sitting in that seat of this is where we're dreaming, this is where we're creating, this is the space that we're creating every single day, it is going to be harder and harder and harder for you to actually create that into reality, because this industry, this company doesn't exist yet. So if you are a doer, find yourself a dreamer. If you are a dreamer, find yourself a doer. And you have to make that CEO, COO relationship work on fire. You need to be the most dynamically, intimately, beautifully operating duo that is going to inspire everyone else around you that these dreams are actually going to come into reality. And it's really important. Walt Disney said 1,000 times over, never let the accountants talk to the dreamers. And he built the business and the accountants a whole nother campus away from where the creative sat. You need your creative to be uninterrupted, and you need that person or those people to allow themselves to dream wicked and amazing solutions into the world. And then you need to translate that over into the doers and the accountants and the people that can tell you no, but never should they meet too early in the process. So that's an internal piece of operation, like scaling advice. Always diligence your investors. Ask them difficult questions. Ask them everything you want to know. Challenge yourself to actually write down a dream list of what your investor would be. And if they don't hit that, ask them why. Ask them if there's any opportunity for them to actually align to your dream list. And if the answers are not convincing, or if the answers are no, be secure enough in the fact that the money will come from the right people at the right time, but it's not those people. And don't accept things that you're not prepared to accept just because you need the money immediately. There are always ways that you can look at scaling. So understand that currency doesn't only include money. There are so many ways to get paid, or there are so many ways to do things at scale that don't require money, but do require creativity. And women are so creative because they've been creative for so much longer and they've been required to. And so that is what's another huge reminder, is that you've probably already done very creative things to get to this point in time, and that you can continue to do that even when you haven't raised the capital itself. And then I guess the final thing is balance. Do not give away all of your power to investors just because they have the money. You have the idea. So balance yourself in that power dynamic however you need to, whether you need to get coaching, mentoring, advice, whether you need to join a networking group. Arm yourself with information so you can balance the power dynamic between yourself and the investors.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Caitlin, for all of that insight. That's going to be very valuable to FemTech founders globally. So thank you so much for that, and we'll wrap up there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this great interview. And now, Kate, it's back to you, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Well, first of all, I would like to start with giving big thanks to everyone who joins us as speakers, as well as our moderators and our audience, of course, because the company that organizes today's event, and it's our third event since June of this year, we're very young, obviously. So the field of FemTech has always been interesting to Deep Knowledge Group, and FemTech Analytics is under the umbrella of Deep Knowledge Group. You may have heard of us because we've been in operation in one form or another since 2013. Some of you may have heard of Deep Knowledge Ventures. Our flagship investment is in in silico medicine. And Deep Knowledge Group as a whole has always been active since its inception on many fronts of deep tech, be it longevity, which continues to be our key focus, defined as living healthier for longer, but also there are other avenues that we pursue, including FemTech, AI, and a number of others. So our group structure has 3 branches. We have investment funds, as I mentioned, but also a very important component of our structure is analytical subsidiaries, because they actually provide intelligence to our group. FemTech, as I mentioned, is a new field for us. However, it is, of course, part of human health. The purpose of analytical subsidiaries is to provide intelligence to us and also to general public, because we have made most of our reports open access. Third branch of activities that we have is nonprofit. We've established a number of collaborations, at least in part due to the fact that we've produced good analytical, open access analytical reports. We've partnered with Longevity UK, Biogerontology Research Foundation. We're also co-founders of All-Party Parliamentary Group on Longevity in the United Kingdom. There's also a number of other initiatives. So in terms of what does FemTech Analytics do? We started producing open access analytics. And by the way, all of our analytical reports are supported by corresponding interactive IT platforms. So you can mix and match, you can do precise searches, which I think is helpful. We are delighted to bring together, a community of people who are interested in FemTech, and we will continue inviting the audience to our free online conferences. And in the future, we'll also be providing corresponding proprietary services as well. In terms of open access analytics, our flagship report was released earlier this year in July, and we have received feedback from the players in the space, for which we're grateful. And that actually prompted us to provide an updated version of this report. We are now in the process of finalizing a report on FemTech industry landscape overview for Q4 of this year. It's not available yet, but it will be available in open access, and you can find all of our analytics, at the link reference at this slide. We also have another report that we released, which focuses on FemTech industry in Switzerland. So Ksenia, perhaps we can, discuss this later because you're based in Switzerland. There's also a report focusing on United Arab Emirates. So what I wanted to do today is share some of the key takeaways of our upcoming analytical report. And again, it is partially based on our previous one. However, we did update the methodology and database. And we also did a survey in September and improved this study in a number of other ways. This slide actually represents an interactive mind map that corresponds to the report itself, and you could see how you can search by such criterions, whether someone is an investor or a company, as well as by sector as well. So in terms of FemTech and what is it? So we actually accept the, kind of like a general definition, which is product, services, software, diagnostics, which focus on women's health and well-being. The subsectors that we include in classification are reproductive health and contraception, pregnancy and nursing, pelvic and uterine health care, menopause care, menstrual health, mental health, sexual health. We also include 3 other categories. One is generically described as women's wellness, such as, for instance, fitness and nutrition, trackers of health data, as well as other combined solutions. We also highlight longevity, and as a way of example, we could say that it is the detection, monitoring, and treatment of chronic diseases. And also general healthcare, such as preventive care, hormonal health, female-specific cancers, and a number of others. If we look at the distribution of FemTech companies globally, we would see that majority of them, 8% almost, to be exact, in North America, followed by Europe and Asia. In terms of countries, United States takes a definite lead with 54% of companies being stationed there, followed by UK, India, Israel, and Canada. If we look at what do these FemTech companies do, we would see that pregnancy and nursing take the lead, followed by reproductive health and contraception, menstrual health, general healthcare, pelvic and uterine healthcare, sexual health, and so on. In terms of the types of products that the companies offer, it is consumer products, for instance, feminine care. There's also, of course, devices, wearables, hardware, followed by apps and software, digital platforms, diagnostics, telehealth, vitamins and supplements. If we talk about the investment landscape, we would say that since 2012, the compound annual growth rate, was 30.2%. But remarkably, FemTech only occupies 4% of investment in life sciences. Of course, you can look on the bright side and say that since 2012, there was a tenfold growth in VC investment, and 2021 was the year when the 1 billion mark was finally crossed in terms of VC investment in FemTech. Well, personally, as a representative of FemTech Analytics, we believe that this number is still too low, and we hope to actually, help bring more attention to the topic and invest ourselves as well. In terms of the reason behind, the fact that FemTech does not attract the well-deserved higher amount of investment is the fact that there's actually a poor track record of sizable exits. This being said, there were actually a number of notable FemTech deals this year. You can take a look in more detail in our report. This is just a brief example. So there is hope, and we hope that this trend will continue in the earnest. If we look at where do investors sit, again, we see that North America leads, predominantly by United States, again followed by UK, then Canada, Switzerland, and Germany. This diagram essentially just shows that it's another diagram of our interactive platform in action, and it also shows that the biggest number of investment goes to reproductive health and contraception subsector. So in terms of the key challenges and opportunities in FemTech, I've mentioned that we are new to the field, so we are taking the back seat in terms of listening to the feedback from the key industry players. So we actually, as part of that, conducted a survey when we reached out to a number of influencers who shared their insights about the key trends and the major roadblocks in the field of FemTech. And the feedback was such that in terms of major threats and challenges, number one was lack of investment, then insufficient R&D funding, lack of public support, pace of education, economic slowdown, and a number of other reasons. In terms of opportunities, the audience actually highlighted the importance of increasing brand recognition and awareness, as well as improving customer experience, accessing and implementing innovations, expanding to new markets, and attracting skilled talents and experts. And in terms of the key trend in the fields, the audience named, fertility and pregnancy tech, menopause tech, menstrual tech, mental tech, sex tech, and others. So, and this is the result of our survey in a more granular way. So we've had such excellent presentations, and I know that Ksenia had to cut our speakers off, so I look forward to our Q&A session. And in the end, I would like to very briefly update as to what are our next projects, what we're working on, because again, it's a privilege to be part of this community, and we intend to continue playing an active part in it. So again, we started in Q2 of this year. We produced several analytical reports already, and we will continue doing so. And one of our upcoming reports, in addition to the Q4 investment digest, is the FemTech industry in the USA, which of course is an obvious choice given that USA is the key player here. That we will then also have a study on Canada. Then there will be a study on AI and FemTech, and AI is actually a topic that has been of great interest to us for a number of years. We will also do a study on the United Kingdom as well. And of course, we will have a number of other free online conferences to come. Here is just a little bit about what we're doing in terms of longevity sphere in general. Perhaps longevity biomarkers could be of interest to FemTech community as well. And again, we're very easy to reach. Myself on LinkedIn or via email, as well as our group's websites. And again, these reports are in large part open access. And further, apologize, I seem to be having some technical glitch here with slide switching. Also, speaking of investing, we are forming an SPV, and we're going to be investing in FemTech companies. And once we form this entity, we'll actually be able to share more about this project. Also, we're working. Our team works on the group called on the book called Women Longevity. We'll probably see it, at the beginning of next year. And then also for everyone, we've started this blog on our website, www.femtech.health/blog, where we're essentially doing a number of things, like the survey that we had, the results of the survey that I mentioned, we published there. And also anyone really who wants to, bring meaningful feedback, be it an interview or an article or any other contribution, we welcome you to, contact us or visit the blog, and we're happy to, share the information that you contribute on our website. So with that, thank you very much. And I don't want to take too much time, and I will, pass the floor to Ksenia.
Thank you so much, Kate. Just once again, want to acknowledge the amazing work that you guys are doing, not only in terms of the reports that are extremely insightful and informative, but also in terms of creating the community, really the global FemTech community through your events and all the cool stuff that you're doing. Thank you, Kate. With that, I would like to invite all the panelists, so including Kate, Alyssa, Alexa, and Priyanka, to turn on their cameras and join us. And we also have one more person joining us, which is Julian Rossman, who is a senior associate ventures in digital health at Plug and Play Tech Center. Julian, glad to meet you. Thank you so much for joining us. And let's start a little bit to wake up everybody, maybe with a little bit of warm-up exercise. You all have experience with startups, so let's imagine a bit of a situation that you're an early stage FemTech venture, you need a lawyer, and let's imagine it's a magical lawyer. He can help you with your IP, but he can also help you with your term sheet. You need a communications and marketing professional. And again, let's imagine somebody who can help you to create great scientific communication, but also build cool marketing campaigns on social media targeted to all of the different audiences that you need to address, which are investors, but also potentially consumers and corporates. And you also need a techie that can either help you build a super cool product or help you in the R&D. And you can only afford 2 out of 3. So a lawyer, a marketing, and a tech person. Which 2 would you choose and why? Let's start with Alexa.
Oh man, am I myself? Well, I would choose the things I'm bad at. So I would say, let's hire the tech person and the lawyer, and I can help you out on the market.
Sounds good. Elisa, how about you?
I'm gonna have to agree because I can do marketing. So I think marketing is really important. So it's really hard to choose, but I would have to go with tech and lawyer. Marketing and tech may seem obvious, but I've found with legal, if you try to go the cheap route or you try to go it on your own, it just costs you more money in the end coming back to clean it all up.
Great. Julian, how about you? Are you also good at marketing?
I agree. Yeah, I think if you're the founder, you have to be good at marketing. And if you don't know how to translate your scientific knowledge into the business area, the commercial realm, then you need to work on that skill set and you shouldn't hire it out. You should be able to do it yourself. But I also am really good at that as I was an English major and used to do some of that translation work for founders. So I feel confident that I need to hire a tech person and agree with Elisa on why you need a lawyer.
Priyanka, you obviously have no problems with communication. So would it be the same too on your side?
I think it's very important this is a great question to start. I think it's really important to understand as there is a difference between sales and marketing. We usually bring them under the one umbrella. There are two different things. I'm really good at marketing, so I would also go with a lawyer. However, it's always good to do research because there are a lot of communities where they're bringing lawyers together under one umbrella. So you can save a lot of legal fees upfront. Unless you have a client who really wants to see your product, don't spend your money on it. I didn't do it for the first 6 months. So I saved a lot of it. So it's usually lawyer for me. Legal is very important, especially with intellectual property because we're selling things online. So you want to make sure that you are protected. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Priyanka, for this. Kate, what about you?
Well, as a lawyer by background, I will, of course, defer with everyone by saying that lawyers are very important and actually they can save you lots of money. I think that marketing is something that I will probably be able to manage myself as well. And I've been exposed to a great marketing team at Deep Knowledge Group. So I think I'm in consensus with the rest of the speakers here.
Sounds great. And everyone else, feel free to share your reflections on this in the chat. Let's move to a little bit more serious questions. Investors. When you will be talking to investors and when the investors will be doing the due diligence, there is one thing they would want to see in your financial projections, which are very challenging if you're an early stage startup. And that is a break-even point, which will be very different for, let's say, biotech startup or a wellness startup. As investors, what are your expectations on the break-even point and strategy? When should it be for FemTech products? Granted, different categories of products, different break-even in terms of time, but is it 1 year, 2 years? What is your take on that? Who would like to start?
Well, I can start, even though I don't. My business is not FemTech, but because I sit with a lot of coaching and mentoring that. The world and the market in terms of demographic has changed. Pandemic has changed those boundaries. We don't have any reports to benchmark that. Let's be very honest. So what I'm going to tell you is every industry, every product has a different measurements and benchmark to measure. You can pitch one and take one report and say, hey, you know what? This has worked for me. Take this and work for yourself. It's you to each their own. So what I'm going to tell you, everyone in the room, see where you stand. What problems are you solving? What are your product and services? Is it service or product? Because in the end, sometimes startups, they don't know whether they are selling a service or a product. So first, it's really important for you to slow down, go back to the drawing board and say, what I am solving, is it a service or a product? And again, give yourself 6 months to assess. At the same time, keep changing your plan. You can't just have one plan and say, hey, I'm going to work for it and not being able to. So in the end, see where you are. Your story, your business is unique to you and it's not going to copycat other one. That's what I can say to everyone on the call today.
Thank you. Alexa, let's get brutal here. Come on. What is your take on it?
Sure. I think if you sort of point to, not to call anyone out, but somebody like Uber, where their initial business model, the economics were pretty pie in the sky. That era is probably over, where no matter what business you're pitching, the core business, the business you're doing today, and the business that you're pitching today, not your future business growth opportunities, needs to have healthy margins and actually just have the economics need to make sense. So I'd go that route, that whatever core business you're building today, at some point, if you sort of turn off the growth marketing machine, there has to be profit built in and healthy margin. And then whatever additional business units you could see yourself growing in the future, those are sort of icing on the cake. But the key business should have the promise of healthy margins.
Thank you. Elisa, anything to add?
I mean, they both covered it pretty well. I do have one note though, and it's not that I disagree. I do think that you can have both a product offering that has a service aspect to it if you do it right. And so it is really knowing how to achieve that balance. But yeah, you have to be able to pivot and you have to be able to listen to the market as you're growing the strategy.
Julian, any expectations on break even point
Yeah,
or year?
No, yeah, for sure. If it's B2B, you get more time, frankly, because it takes a lot longer to build up those relationships. And in healthcare, I've seen more companies go direct to consumer in the last 2 years because B2B was harder to do, like even harder to do. So now with the direct to consumer, you're seeing revenue like within the first year for sure. I mean, it might be small, and but that's a start. I mean, you can have your beta customers are actually paying to be part of the beta. It's not totally free. So direct to consumer revenue right out the gate, basically.
Thank you. Kate, a lawyer perspective?
Well, not a lawyer perspective, but we're not really looking for quick returns. Like, for instance, we believed in AI and drug discovery back in the day when, it was in very embryonic stage. So, and then of course, now it's a very hot field. We had a conference about it yesterday, actually. So for us, this is not a primary objective, but we do want to make with our investment, a big impact and improvement. So we would like to see something like, for instance, we're big believers in AI. So that would everything to do with that as it applies to FemTech would be definitely of interest to us. I hope this answers the question.
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting that in your report, of course, North America is huge, right? And there are more opportunities for FemTech ventures because there are also a lot of investors. You also mentioned other countries like Canada and Germany. In your opinion, or in opinion of everybody here, what are now kind of the FemTech hubs and kind of places to be globally?
Well, you would be surprised, and I'm not trying to please our moderator here, but actually we believe that Switzerland holds lots of and in fact, we have a report on that. So I think we need to talk.
Sounds great. Anyone else? Any thoughts on any other country? I'll take Switzerland any day, but.
I think I can add something from Canada. So I think if you are aware on the call, like Canada, our health system is government regulated. The health line, even for a common flu, you have to wait at least a week to get through a doctor. So now with economy, in terms of our political leaders are going to, point where it's relaxation are coming in, more companies are coming in terms of an outside investor. And there is a way where there is bringing a more private healthcare in the sector, because the way our healthcare is built is like pre-ancient, is like 100 years old, nothing has changed. You're still in a queue. So right now, Canada is upcoming. There are a lot of startups that are coming, and especially they're catering to the millennials who are accessing healthcare through apps. So it's a bigger market right now.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. That's happening here too in the US more and more. There's more virtual care options, and then there's more coverage that is starting to accommodate that virtual care. And so there's a lot more niche care that's available at our fingertips. I mean, I was introduced to a company and given it basically looks like an ear thermometer, but it's a way to look and see if your child has an ear infection. And then you just do a quick telehealth visit and it's dealt with in the middle of the night. And that's getting coverage by Medicaid and then the major insurers. So, and being that women, we're talking about FemTech, that's pediatric care, but women are the #1 decision makers in the household. We are more willing to lean towards a virtual care model for the sake of convenience, for the sake of getting care quickly, especially for our children, ourselves, our families.
For sure. I would say the Middle East is pretty exciting, places where FemTech topics have been very taboo, and that using digital technologies to bring them to the forefront and get women out of the shadows for their healthcare. That's very normal, what they're going through, and that many other people have. Those are the regions I'm really excited to see FemTech grow.
And I also add UK. I'm actually quite pleased that that we probably are listening well to our audience, because the regional reports that we're planning to release, in addition to Switzerland, is actually do involve Canada, UK, and the United Arab Emirates. So I'm glad that others think similarly.
There's a question in the chat about Africa. Does any of you consider Africa as, there is a lot of things happening in Africa right now. There are some innovation hubs, interesting things happening in Nairobi, in Kenya. Allianz, one of the insurances, I work for the insurance business, so I know these things, is opening also some activities there in terms of innovation. Do you think that in the next 5 years, we'll see also an increased demand for FemTech solutions in Africa?
Well, hopefully. And our research is global, right? So I didn't have a chance to delve into details, but there are some countries, including in Africa, that do have FemTech companies, and in the future we will definitely do a report on Africa as well. So whoever asks these questions, if you have any pointers or suggestions, please reach out. I would be delighted to address this topic and arrange the analytics team for that.
Yeah, I agree. It's I think there's a couple issues at play in Africa. So first, you have to get some basic infrastructure turned digital. So that's why the FemTech market might be so small at the moment, because they're still working on some other sort of more basic foundation work. But also there's products that have been built out in other markets that are not going to translate to Africa, either like culturally or just price point wise. So they'll be sort of built again, like a Me Too version built in Africa, but they'll be built differently because they're built years later with a different context and by the local people. So the next cool thing in FemTech could be in 3 to 5 years could actually be originated from Africa and then exported to Canada or US or something like that.
Thank you. Maybe a bit of a more pragmatic question to Alexa. Can you remind us, what is the stage of the startups that you guys are looking at?
Halogen invests pre-seed through Series A. We basically, our sweet spot is a 20 million valuation or below. If it's confusing, what stages across the globe, what stages are called what? I'd say the other distinction is we do look for some sort of revenue in the consumer packaged goods space, as opposed to we'll consider pre-revenue SaaS or tech companies.
So there's a very cool startup in our Tech Forever cohort, which is called Wild with a V, and they're actually developing tampons made from algae. So sustainable, recyclable. You should definitely check them out. Another question that came upon, we didn't have a lot of time to speak about the SHIO, and there was a bit of a confusion in the chat. Is it a fund? Is it a VC? Priyanka, can you maybe tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, thank you so much. So just to give a brief description in a nutshell, so SHIO is a woman and non-binary led venture that has been born 5 years ago in Canada. It is not a venture, but it's something called a perpetuity fund, where we women like you and me will pull in a denomination of dollars every month on a yearly basis, and that fund goes in the whole one fund, where when you apply as a venture, so voting process opens every year. Right now, SHIO is present in Canada, UK, US, New Zealand, and Australia. So women, right now we have 6,000 active members, which we call as activators, who are willingly are investing every month. So someone like you who has a dream, who have an idea, can be funded. These are women who have brilliant ideas, but may not have the credit history to go to a bank, may not have the communication or internet to bring those ideas to the forefront. So they are coming to SHIO, applying through a form, through a voting process, and we are funding them in terms of getting them the money, getting them the coaching and mentoring services, and make sure they're up and running. And once they're up and running between 3 to 5 years, that money, that cold gain, comes back in the fund so we can reinvest. So it's like it's going from my hand to yours and yours and yours. So it goes in a circle.
But is there some due diligence process? Do you assess this investment opportunities? Okay.
Yes, there is the full process and due diligence. There are a lot of firms and intellectual and legal owners that goes in the process, and that can be done via the website.
Thank you.
It's a great avenue to explore, because there is another way to get funding. So we know there is a way, there's a better way to get funding.
I will reach out to you later to see how we can set it up in Switzerland. I'm super interested. I just need to find 500 women, and you know, we're a small country, so, but not as small as Liechtenstein. Moving on to another topic, a little bit less linked to the fundraising, a little bit more linked to FemTech. FemTech received a lot of criticism, of course, surprise, and being accused of not being inclusive enough, excluding mentech or androtech, so everything linked to male fertility, for example, and also accusing of not including LGBTQI plus communities. Want to know the take of the panel on it, because for personally me, I never excluded those two. I mean, you know, if somebody applies to Tech Forever Accelerator with a male fertility solution, welcome, or if this is something, you know, for LGBTQ sexual wealth or something like that, other challenges that are being, you know, important for this communities, of course, you know, we would look into that, and for us it would be FemTech as well, because it addresses very important challenges. What is your take on that? I don't know who'd like to start.
I'm still processing the question.
I can maybe take a stab at it. I mean, from my perspective, I think of FemTech as the female body, biologically. So if you identify that way, regardless of how you say it, you know, trans or LGBTQ, if you have the conditions that are specific to a woman's body, then I think FemTech applies to you, and the solutions are there. But if you don't have some of those features, and you're never going to experience some of those problems, there's a lot of FemTech, I think, that you'll never use. So it gets a little tricky there. And I think your male fertility example is a great one too, because that fertility issue is a two-sided coin, right? You need both sides to make a baby. And so if one side is struggling, and it's really, you know, it's the man's and your partner's side that's not working, and that's why the couple can't have a baby, like it's got to be part of the FemTech if we're talking about fertility as a FemTech topic. But then it quickly like goes off course, because you're saying, well, you know, prostate cancer is not a FemTech solution, but breast cancer is a FemTech solution, but men can have breast cancer. It gets really gray very fast. So I guess it depends where and like when you're using the cutoffs. I don't think it's coming up that often. I think it's like, I guess in reports, maybe like, do you count this investment or not? But it just doesn't come up enough for me to worry about it, because Plug and Play invest in startups that are not just FemTech. And there's not very many FemTech exclusive funds. And I'm sure they also just do it case by case.
Thank you.
And my sense here, you know, still, you know, being a relative newbie in this field, you know, because our perception actually was that FemTech in terms of investment is grossly underrepresented. It is good to see that definition of FemTech actually, you know, starts to stray away from, you know, its traditional focus, such as, you know, reproductive health, to other areas, including, you know, sex tech or mental health, so on. And if we take anything to do with sexual well-being, obviously everyone heard about, you know, Viagra and a bunch of other things, you know, and the similar issue was not addressed in terms of FemTech previously. So the criticism can go, both ways. I think there is space for everyone, and personally, you know, we are, you know, happy to see that, FemTech is attracting more attention that, it definitely deserves. So that, in my opinion.
Thanks, Kate. I don't know, anyone else wants to add on that? Yeah.
I think I would like to add is like, right now, in terms of the global world, we really have to recognize that whatever solutions we are bringing to the table, it needs to cater to all the population, given that now gay marriages and everything else there are a lot of countries that are legalized those conversations. Those people are coming out of the closet. So in terms of how your marketing and sales, the language should be inclusive. And no matter how you're identifying yourself as non-binary, the bodies are still have the same kidneys and same lungs. It's not a different body. So we are, no matter how you're looking at yourself from an outside perspective, you still have the body of a female or a man genitalia. So we want to make sure the products and the service and the communication are inclusive, because that's the world we are going in. We are not going backwards. And in the moving forward, more of these men or women non-binary are coming forward. So I want to make sure it's inclusive solutions that we are building.
That's really cool that you bring it up. Moving on to the next question, we spoke a lot about investors, we spoke a lot about venture funds, but we did not speak enough, in my opinion, about other sources of financing apart from 3Fs, so family, friends, and fools, that can be relevant for startups. And this can be, for example, research grants. This can be also partnerships with either corporates, insurance companies, hospitals, or it can be partnerships with health government organizations like NHS. What would be your advice on, let's say, other fundraising strategies, on partnerships with maybe NHS or some other organizations? As Tech Forever, we organize a lot of events that help people to discover, that help our startups discover and enter other markets like Japan, like UK. What we have learned that, for example, if you want to enter UK market, you most likely will have to work with the NHS, but it will be very challenging and it might take up to 1 year to actually do something. So what's your take on alternative investments and partnerships?
I can go first, and I'm speaking
Sure.
more from a North American perspective. A lot of the success that I have seen with some of the femtech industries in Canada is those women, even men and non-binary, they are working with their local government, not on a granular level. So they are starting from their provincial or on in their territories and bringing those ideas to the table. So those representatives can go and talk about themselves in a bigger group. So you really have to start small, and you really have to see what other opportunities are going to be available in your area, in your sector, and make sure it's working for you. Start somewhere, because you can't do this alone. So you really have to take political help who can be able to elevate your voices and solutions and bring the money to the table for you.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on partnering with non-investors?
Sure, I'd say one sort of pocket of money you haven't talked a ton about is just debt. And there's particularly if you're making physical goods, or there's also venture debt if you're working on tech solutions. I think a lot of VCs don't play nicely with debt because they get paid back before we do. And that's one reason why you won't necessarily hear about it in discussions like this about fundraising. But if you are really clear on your margins and your economics, there's no reason you might not explore revenue-based financing, purchase order financing. There's a lot of options for you that may feel more expensive upfront, but in fact, you retain more ownership of the company long-term. Somebody like Silicon Valley Bank will often invest, they'll offer a line of credit following a big financing round. And so they lean on the lead investor, who's often an equity investor, to sort of do the diligence to say, you know, we're giving them 8 million, they'll give them another 6. And the idea is basically the VC is the collateral that's backing that loan.
Thank you. Elisa, before you leave us, any thoughts on non-investor funds?
Yeah. I found grant funding is a really good one to go after, especially in this sector. It's getting the most attention out of probably any area of healthcare. Grants are already trying to focus on this. Grant-driven projects have already been trying to focus on this work for years. So you might be able to go in from that realm. They typically try to focus on the nonprofit areas here in the US anyway. But there is typically a small amount of funding set up with each one. Another way to approach it too is you can essentially offer, if you have a SaaS solution, you can offer that solution to the grant, maybe give them some of the data that you have that they can use with whatever studies they might be working on. So there are ways to work with grant funding. That's probably been my favorite. I tend to try to recommend staying away from taking money from the wrong investor, even though it's money. and try not to take on any debt if you can avoid it. So this would probably be my best pieces of advice. I unfortunately do have to drop off. I'm so sorry.
Thank you so much.
Amazing, amazing panel. I'm very honored to have been a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye. And another thing that maybe on the investment perspective, I can say that from like my experience exchanging with some founders, what also worked great is hiring specialized people, especially if you're going into certain markets that can help you connect with the investors there and raise funds, and then they just take a small percentage. But they have a direct interest. You need just to make sure that these are the right investors for you and for your company, as was already mentioned. And let's maybe finish by a very sexy topic, which is blockchain. I personally love this technology, despite the controversy and despite the big promise that maybe I think we experienced a little bit of blockchain bubble, right? Like 2018, everything got tokenized. Like, as I say, only my dog did not create an ICO, everyone else did. And then it kind of went down, and though the tech matured, we still see very few implementations, especially in health, right? However, clearly the technology has a lot of potential, and we're seeing now more and more startups in health tech and a little bit in femtech using that. The coolest application that I see is that blockchain technology can also allow you to store your data in a very secure way, and there are some companies that are giving you back the ownership of your data, which you decide what do you want to do with. Do you want to donate it for research? Do you want to sell it to somebody and get some incentives? I believe that data and more information on fertility journeys, pregnancy journeys, and especially at-risk pregnancies has a potential to disrupt the industry and to develop really cool solutions. So is there a future for blockchain and femtech, and what is the next big thing, or maybe not, and how, in your opinion, data can transform the field as well? Who would like to start? Kate, how about you? You've been super silent.
Well, I think I will probably take a back seat because I would like to listen to experts here. So, but in general, of course, yes, no one can underestimate the importance of data. I mentioned earlier that we're big believers in AI. Of course, data privacy and security obviously is an issue that needs to be addressed. So yes, I think it's great in terms of what's the latest and greatest and how we can implement it in specific examples. I will defer to either panelists here.
Thank you.
I can jump here. So again, coming from technology, I think blockchain was another kind of a big shiny object that was introduced in 2011. There were a lot of companies that went through the chain. However, we really have to understand each country has a different regulation process for data privacy. And it's not sometimes applicable. So even though if me as an entrepreneur would like to use blockchain for my own business, maybe my client don't have the capacity or have the ability to use that kind of service. So we really have to see whether your community, your clients, your customers, current and potential, are ready for using that kind of services. And it's not just if this is able to be successful in Canada, it may not be successful in Switzerland. Let's just for the argument's sake. So it's not like one solution fit all. So you really have to take a grain of salt, and there is no like right or wrong answer. So, so you really have to see, are you ready? Your market is ready. You are ready as a business, or the country or the province or the territory you're living are going to be operating the same way, because sometimes the next shiny objects may not be a solution for you.
Thank you. Julian, would you like to add on that?
Yeah, I think similar. Don't use blockchain if it doesn't make sense for the product you're building. It's a really great technology for certain use cases. It doesn't need to be in everything.
Thanks. Anyone else? Alex, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would echo Julian that the having clean, helpful data, like any kind of universal healthcare records. The toughest thing is just sort of making sure that the data is accurate and that we're all speaking the same language, and the storage of it is maybe to me a secondary challenge. I don't want false information to be immutably recorded forever. So I think there are interesting applications across healthcare with supply chain and identification and things that blockchain sort of has been promising us. And I'm a little bit on the fence of like, I think we may have some challenges to solve on the front end on what we're collecting before we sort of figure out exactly how to store it and lock it up.
Thank you. We are soon going to approach the end of this conference. So before you all go, I want to do this thing that I love to do when I moderate sessions. Can I please ask you all to make sure that you're messaging everybody, not just the panelists and hosts. Write a message, but don't send it. Don't send it. And I will do like a countdown, like 3, 2, 1, and then I will ask you to send it. So just write the message now, but do not send it. And write either how you're feeling right now. So me, I'm feeling like super pumped, super energetic. Maybe you're feeling down, you know, and that's also okay to share that with us. But I hope you're feeling something positive right now. Or write one action that you're going to do in the next 10 days that was inspired or sparked in you by this conference. So write it right now. Now I'm gonna count down. 3, 2, 1, send it. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is called a waterfall. I don't know, Kate, if you have any closing remarks. I just would like to thank you all. It's been really, really cool.
Well, listen, we thank everyone. I think this have been a productive 3 hours. I know we had lots of attendees. It's been a pleasure to be part of this, robust panel discussion as well. We had a very interesting panel previously. Again, we're very, excited to be part of this community, and we are grateful for the feedback and the time and efforts that everyone attributes. We would, in our turn, would like to bring more attention to the field of FemTech and be active participants in the space. Thanks, of course, to our moderators. You've done an amazing job. And for everyone, we would love to see you again, because we'll continue having our free online conferences probably early next year, given the holidays. And for everyone in the audience, I know there were lots of comments and questions. We will answer the questions if they were asked, or you can reach out to us with other questions you may have. We will have a recording of this video, which we will probably edit slightly because we had a technical issue with the video quality. And you will receive it in a few days' time, and we will also post it on social media. So with that, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to seeing you soon.